Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to be doing a top 10 list for all countries. Previously, we had done a top 10 countries list for just Europe specifically, of which France was the winner. And the reason we did this list before the top 10 overall list is because only 3 European countries make it into the top 10 overall. So I did want to talk about European countries. And so today we are going to be talking about the top 10 overall. Now, for this, we have developed a system for rating and ranking the countries, a system that relies on numbers. And because of this, we're going to have to rely on something. We're going to have to rely on something that, if you have any children under the tender age of 38, I advise you have them leave the room. You know, throw them down the stairs, lock them in the cupboard, invite them to play hide and seek in the dryer, because what follows next is not fit for their eyes, which is, of course, I'll give you a second, a spreadsheet. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be ranking the nations systematically based on a variety of categories. We're going to be giving a score 1 through 7 with an occasional 8, and we are going to have a single player aggregate score, and we are going to have a multiplayer aggregate score, and then in the kind of for each of these categories, for every single one of them, they are going to have an individual weight. This will be publicly available if you wanted to have your own categories, change the weightings of stuff and see how things form out. But here is the list for Europe. We did update a few things because we kind of changed our opinions, moved down the countries that have merchant republics and moved up France a little bit, down England a little bit, stuff of this nature. I think Hungary got a little bit of a bump, but this is the system we're going to be using. A fuller explanation is on the top 10 European videos, and we're just going to kind of get into this, starting with some honorable mentions. Alright, for the first honorable mention, we have completely unranked Barless. And the idea here is you play as the Timurids, and you do on Rampage and Conquest, and you have these very, very strong flavor and journal entry, and I didn't feel comfortable rating this kind of in the same system that we are rating these other countries for 2 reasons. One, the ratings would be completely off and whack, because the strength of the Timurids is completely oblique, because you just get this like really strong conquering aspect, and you could do a lot of crazy stuff. And 2, I haven't played as the Timurids personally, so I didn't really feel comfortable inserting them. Just know that they're extremely strong. Depending on the level of exploits and cheese you're willing to do, they might be considered just the strongest start possible, but we are going to kind of leave them off the list and have a more of a start or sort of standard play style with which we are rating things, but it is definitely worth mentioning Barless. Next up, we have in 14th place Mali with 2 really big asterisks. The asterisks are 1, their disaster is really, really nasty when we last played it. It has been made easier since we played it. I don't know how tough it is. I do think if it is manageable, that Mali will be really, really strong. And the second asterisk is colonization has been changed. It's been changed so that malaria doesn't factor in at all. I assume that malaria will be reintroduced, and one of the really big strengths of Mali is that it can ignore malaria as far as colonization goes, and has access to an enormous chunk of land, and has a strong multiplayer adjustment because they are relatively isolated and still can benefit a lot from colonization, both in the New World and colonizing into Africa, where they will be returned to the pops that they colonize with, and so they will be very, very strong. Also, they have a bunch of soft expansion, and very importantly, very, very strong resources. They don't have extremely strong content. They have a few things here or there. I believe a gold buer is probably their strongest advance for the monthly inflation, allowing them to have double the minting that you would otherwise normally have. But other than that, they don't have anything too crazy. They have a barracks that they start with. This is maybe something worth mentioning. They also have access to the sub-Saharan Africa tech tree, which is a little bit of, we'll show that real quick because that is a secret thing. It doesn't show up in any of the content ahead of time, but what it gives you is a bunch of goodies. Everyone who is in sub-Saharan Africa gets it. We get the proximity cost, monthly legitimacy. This is a really strong modifier for eco, because if you have a bunch of monthly monthly legitimacy modifiers. It decreases the expense of the most important slider. Cav power is really strong in this world where Cav is really good the first 3 ages. We have a little bit of tolerance, some manpower, and culture capacity. Just a really strong tree available to everyone in sub-Saharan Africa, and it doesn't show up. But other than this, Mali doesn't have anything too crazy beyond the resources. But the resources are really good. The isolation, I think, is pretty strong in multiplayer, and I do think that there is a lot of game to Mali if you can navigate the disaster successfully. Next up, skipping over 13th place Hungary, because it is in the European video, we have Majapahit. They have a really nice geography where they will have access to all of Indonesia, relatively isolated, and at the same time, they can colonize into Australia. Australia has very low pops, so you will get the locations extremely quickly, and then you will benefit from the 1% pop growth. And so effectively, they will be hitting around 15 million pops at the same time France does, even though they start with 1/4 the pops of France. They can really generate an enormous amount of pop growth by virtue of colonizing, and then make use of the good resources that are present in Australia here. And so this is a really big strength of them, along with the isolation, especially in multiplayer. But also, coming in for them is going to be, their content is not absolutely incredible. The really kind of standout thing is the Jong, which is a Age 1 lightship that has the same ability to project maritime as an Age 2 lightship, and as cheaper in terms of the maintenance, so you will use it until Age 3. The Jong is quite powerful, but not present in this is a special tech that you gain access to if you have your capital in Indonesia, and what that gives is half a score in proximity cost, which is very, very powerful overseas. This is really, really strong if you're playing a naval nation. I think it makes them really kind of playable. It will reduce the proximity cost you have by like 17% or something like this if you're doing a lot of patrolling, which is really easily facilitated by the Jong, and so you can get a decent amount of proximity to all of your locations, given the fact that you have jungle, which is pretty rough terrain. If there's ever an update where you can change the terrain or change the vegetation from jungle to farmland or jungle to grassland, Majapahit will be way, way, way stronger, and this is a very, very strong tech. It's only available if you're in Indonesia. It isn't tied to their content specifically. Everyone in Indonesia will get it, but they are going to be the best in the region. And also, this is kind of something that is a little easy to underrate. All of their pops are really condensed, and so it's really good for building tall in that location, using the peripheries for resources, hoovering in a bunch of power there, having a lot of control there, easy to get crown power, easy to facilitate trade in kind of the periphery regions. You have really excellent resources, and so you have a lot going on in your kind of direction. You have all these cloves over here. You have the only source of cloves in the entire map is in Indonesia, and there's a bunch of gold here, also in Australia, and so really you have a lot going on for you, and very interesting run, very fun to play, is Majapahit. Next up, in an honorable mention / maybe is a lot higher, we have the Ashikaga Shogunate, and this is difficult to evaluate for kind of 3 reasons. The first is that they are going to have situations that are just kind of insane and have been changing over the past few months, and I'm not sure exactly how they work and how they shake things out, but specifically Sengoku Jidai, you will erupt into a warring states period in Japan. Now, if you're the Shogunate and this happens, you lose a bunch of your locations, and if you're supposed to start as a daimyo and do this, you're effectively late starting in some sort of sense. You get to chip up a lot of money, but this late start is a significant detriment, right? And I'm thinking, or my understanding is, you're not supposed to play as the Shogunate, and that you're like destined to fail in some sort of way. Our experience with it was bugged, and so for the sake of rating the country, we are assuming you start as the Shogunate and the Sengoku Jidai doesn't exist, which is not the case, but it makes rating these guys a lot more straightforward. The second is, it looks like they have no content, except for they get an absolute enormous amount of events that give really strong bonuses, and those are commensurate with getting really good advances and laws, and so that is a little bit weird. And the third thing is that they probably have the strongest religion in the game. It's got a few decent advances that are solid enough. You have tolerance of heretical beliefs when everyone is heretical kind of in your sphere. That's actually really good. You are going to have a little bit of monthly legitimacy. This is going to be quite strong. And then you have some peasant satisfaction. We'll come back to that later. But what you really have is the strongest CB in the game, and that is going to be inside of your Imperial Court, I believe, and that's authorization for expansion. It does take 50 of your juice, so you can't do this like on cooldown, but you can do this in addition to gaining Parliament CBs, this type of stuff, minus 75% subjugate cost. That is a huge discount. And as far as I know, this is the only thing that has, like, this is the only CB that is not content-specific flavored. You can use this on anyone if you're adjacent to them, and it is very, very strong. And this is the primary thrust, but also you are going to have the very, very powerful increased tax income. You can do this on cooldown. If you're not buying CBs, you will generate enough honor that you can just constantly be doing this. I'm not sure how often you use it in light of the CB costing 50 honor and this costing a little bit. You might just look to have this 100% uptime, but 10% tax efficiency. It is quite strong. And then even more, but wait, there's more. You are going to have on the religion itself this purity system. You will be able to max out purity, and when it is maxed out, you will be getting extra army initiative. It's kind of a little bit of a mild modifier, and also peasant satisfaction equilibrium plus 20%. This, plus the fact that you're getting it in the tech, means you can go serfdom really, really easy to get a ton of peasant max tax, and then you will be able to go and make your peasants really happy despite going max serfdom. So Japan is probably the most clear-cut nation for going serfdom and be able to generate an enormous amount of max tax, and that's really good for you because you have absolutely insane resources. You have a ton of gold piles, you have a ton of silver piles, and you have a ton of spice piles. Here's your gold piles. You also have a ton of silver piles, and you have a bunch of pepper piles. Peter pecked a pickled peppers. How many amounts of pepper did they get on the island? They got this many. And so you are going to be able to generate enormous tax sums from your really, really strong RGOs. You also have a decent amount of pops. Not absolutely enormous, but you have the very soft expand into yuan. Depending on how cheesy/cheeky you want to get with it, you can rate Japan way higher on this metric. I kind of didn't rate them as high because of, I guess, Sengoku Jidai situations and the fact that you have some weird stuff going on in terms of rating their expands, but maybe you should just have this way higher because going after Yuan is very, very soft. They're not kind of attached by land, and Yuan actually will have a navy sometimes, but this is kind of something you have going on for you, and so Japan is going to be very solid, and also one of the ones I'm least confident on in terms of their placement. They didn't make the top 10, but I think it's easily conceivable that they could be like top 5 material. It's just a bit difficult to say and evaluate because they have so many oblique and weird things, and so it'll be interesting to see where they show up later, if they are seemingly a lot stronger, or if Sengoku Jidai is just kind of this intractable factor that just makes them a lot weaker than other starts that aren't hemmed in by such a situation at game start, or 100 years in, or however many. In pseudo 10.5 place, I didn't really want to rank them because there's so many India countries already, but we have Saptagram. Saptagram is the strongest country, or Saptagram / Bengal, because the scrum of these three are all reasonable and strong, is the strongest country with no apparent flavor. They also have the most levies at the start of the game, as far as I know, with like 160,000, but their content is tied to the Bengali language, and so it doesn't appear in here. There is some decent text that is going to be in there. They get tolerance of heathens in age 4, I think RD power in age 4, unique units in age 3 and 4 that aren't especially good, but in age 4 and 5. I think that in age 5 they get 5% infantry power, and then I think it's age 6 that they get 20% output on both a cloth and fine cloth, and so they do have some things that tied to their religion. There's a few more texts, but those are the big standout ones. But the main idea here is they have a lot of pops, they are Muslim, and they are in a region that has a lot of pops, and is also close enough to get institutions, and this is going to be a theme we will be covering quite a bit, so we don't want to belabor it, but Saptagram is the strongest tag with no apparent content. Next up, just to the west, we have Orissa. And I think Orissa has some really strong bonuses and has advantages of pop and also location. And so let's get into the bonuses. Specifically, starting off with possible frontage. I think this is one of the strongest military bonuses in the game, not because it's actually one of the strongest, but because the strongest is more common. The strongest is probably discipline, which allows you to do more damage and take less damage. And so discipline is very, very effective. But discipline is multiplicatively effective with frontage, right? If you get 120% discipline, it is better to be able to bring 10% more guys to the party than it is to go up to 130% discipline in terms of acting as a force multiplier, because when you bring another 10% guys, those are all guys with 120% or with 20% discipline. And so because it is one of the more rare modifiers, and militarily speaking, your fundamental kind of perspective should be bringing as many stats to the table as possible. This allows you to bring more stats. You will very often have more guys than you have frontage, and so just having more frontage will help in this regard. Also, more frontage just lets you roll more guys into the battle. You can roll, in terms of initiative, guys to enter the battle equal to your frontage, and so it allows you to saturate fronts faster as well. Next up, we have legitimacy. Decent eco modifier makes it so you don't have to pay quite as much for cost to court. You stack 10 of these, it's free, at least if you're maxed out at 100. Elephant cavalry, you don't care. Estate satisfaction, equilibrium, pretty solid, not insane. Crown power, pretty solid, not insane. Also, getting it in age 3 is pretty nice. If you get it in the first 3 ages, it's nice. If it's age 4 through 6, it's like kind of a little bit less. You get, and here we get to have our cake and eat it too. We get the 5% discipline here. And then also we're going to get clergy as satisfaction equilibrium. We're going to get age 4 cloth and fine cloth output, which is really, really nice because this is the age where you get the workshop, the first level 2 building upgrade for cloth, both fine and regular. And this is earlier than a lot of other people will get it. And you have an enormous amount of silk and cotton in the region. And so this is going to be really strong for you. You will also have a little bit of trade capacity, some salt output. This is kind of a fine enough one, and monthly development. This is so late in the game, I don't know how good you really consider this. But jumping in, your religion is going to be Hindu, which is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have the Hindu texts, which are good. You are going to have access to the Asia texts, which are good. But taking a quick look at the Hindu tech, I think that you go for self-control. And in particular, I think you go for this max tax modifier here, where you are going to be getting extra income from vassals, and more importantly, the max tax. And so I do think this is quite strong. In the region, you are going to have access to really solid resources, not the absolute most insane, but you can see the cotton, you can see the silk, and you can see the elephants, which are going to be base price 10. Now, elephants usually collapse in price because there isn't a lot of demand for elephants, but they're still, even collapsed in price, still going to be very lucrative for the tax base, and so this is quite nice. Your terrain is rough, but you're just going to play kind of navally, I think, and look to push control along here and this type of thing. And you can also push it up the river once you get kind of access to this territory. It is going to be a river all throughout, so you will get pound lock canals. There's enormous population, so you will be able to city everything that you want. This is a really strong characteristic of India, so you will be able to find veins by which to kind of propagate control. You can look for the flatland and just the forest or just the kind of wood line to get and progress up here into kind of the central area in India with the most pops. An eventual expand spot, Delhi, is very soft if kind of piloted by an AI, and so it's definitely going to be a place you can go for, on top of, you know, kind of being able to push into Southeast Asia. You will also, like every India country, you will have the formable of Bharat, or the kind of alternative version of Bharat, which is going to give you quite a few really good techs. 15% infantry power, also culture's capacity plus 50%. It is an enormous formable, just though, to keep in mind, 861 locations. It requires a lot to get going. You're also going to have tolerance of true faith, a little bit of a kind of some modifiers for cabinet, firearms output is kind of okay. This is really the big one, is the Indian administration, 10% proximity cost, very strong. You're also going to get a little separatism reduction, artillery power, and also nice is the 10% production in kind of the late era. Let's jump in and take a look at the ratings for Orissa. Alright, so coming in, we have a multiplayer adjusted score of 4.34 with similar scores for both single player and multiplayer. Getting things kicked off with the unique content. They have access to all the unique content we showed, as well as having access to the Dharmic tech tree, which is not insane, but has monthly legitimacy and a little bit of population growth, which is a very rare modifier. And they have access to the Asia tree. Now, the Asia tree is going to have research speed. The Dharmic tree also has research speed, and one of the Dharmic choices, you can get more research speed. So in terms of percentage research speed modifiers, India can get the absolute most, but I think the max tax is better. But they are going to, from the Asia tech tree, also get production efficiency, trade capacity, trade efficiency, I think tolerance of heathens, and all of this is just really front-loaded in kind of an early portion of the tree, which is really nice for when you don't gain access to institutions as quickly, because you will have additional really useful text to research, and so that is quite nice. I think that's why that tree is designed like that. But overall, everyone who is in Asia is going to have a really strong tree just by virtue of being in Asia. For the eco bonuses, we have 3.5. We have a little bit of that is going to be the extra output on the textiles. A little bit of that is going to be some of the goodies from the Asia tech tree. From the military bonus, we did talk about having that additional frontage, and also discipline is insane. Population, we gave a score of 4.5. They have a lot of pop, and they have good opportunities for expansion. I think their opportunities for expansion aren't as good as Japan, for example, which is why Japan has 5. Even though they kind of have a similar starting pop. Resources gave it a 5.5. You have access to a bunch of goodies, but not too many premiums outside the elephants, and elephants aren't really like a super premium because the price often drops. For geography, we gave them a 4. They have a very kind of clear plan operating off the coast of India that is quite strong, but is not insane. I do think that the jungle is a very limiting factor, and if it wasn't for having a bunch of jungle territory, they would be pretty nice. But as far as Indian countries go, I think most of them go land focus, and Orissa goes naval focus. And if you go naval focus, you do have quite a bit of play, and you might even be able to start pushing control into Indonesia, but that might be a little bit far. For expands, we gave them 5.5. Good opportunities. Delhi is going to be a soft target. There's some other soft targets around you. You can unify a whole lot, and then you can also go for Southeast Asia relatively quickly. You just have to worry about Saptagram, the absolute terror of India, the country that has the most levies at game start. So that is going to be something you maybe have to navigate. That is a little bit tricky, but there's some softness in there. For explosiveness, we gave them a 3.5. They don't have anything too crazy going on. They aren't going to like really just have a bunch of resources immediately kind of kicking off, but the cotton plays well into the long game, as does the silk. These types of resources, as the production efficiency bonus is going to be nice, and then you get even more of it on top of that, and so that is going to be good. Your margins will get to be very large. For late game, we gave them a 3.5. Your kind of late game idea is forming India, and this is something that's nice, but most of your techs are somewhat front-loaded, and unique stuff that you have is somewhat front-loaded. You do have a plan, but it's not going to necessarily be something that is a super strong late, and you also don't have a geography that I think develops super well into the late game either, because naval does fall off, and you are going to be kind of limited to some extent, because it's not like you're projecting to an enormous amount of locations, even though it is a decent enough strategy for you. Institutions, we have 3.5. Institutions are, Orissa's like on the outer band of can you get the institutions or not. I think Orissa, if you are creative, you can get institutions without needing to brick and not have any researchable tech, but if you're not careful about it, you will get bricked on the research, and so that is going to be kind of a little bit of a limited factor. And also you're going to get the later institutions, we're talking H2 in terms of getting bricked, because you won't get bricked after H2, but even the other ones, you're going to be a little bit slower on the uptake on that. Generally, category where Europe is very strongly advantaged. Also, you notice Japan has a 2. In order to get a score of 1, you need to be in the New World, and even then, that should just be a score of 0. They're just like categorically like way different, and so 2 is kind of basically the bottom of the barrel in terms of what you could get. For formables, we gave them a 4. We give a score of 3 if they have, or if they're kind of a formable already, and they, Orissa has the formable of Bharat, but then even though that formable is really good, it's not a really easy formable that is going to get a huge chunk of power, and so we have them at a 4. For IO/situations, we gave them a score of 4. If you can sneak into the Middle Kingdom, maybe this is higher or should be higher, but they really benefit from the fall of Delhi, giving a soft kind of underbody of Delhi to go for this type of thing. For religion, we gave them a 4.5. I do think that Hindu isn't like insane, but it's very solid, and you're pretty happy with Hindu, and that's something you could definitely work with. For pop density, we gave them a 5. They have a lot of pops in a very small area, and this is really nice for them, and is going to be good. We have manpower score of 3.5, kind of a function of their overall pop score. We have a resilience of 5.5. I don't think that a lot of countries are going to be able to really disrupt their plans very easily unless you are starting... It depends on how many people start in India, right? To some extent. And I think that, in my mind, in multiplayer, you see a lot of... I think you'll see a lot of 3-country Indias where you'll have Delhi, Vijayanagar, and Orissa, and you have more than enough room to play if that's the current situation, and you can expand into Bengal, and you have kind of the better expansion idea of getting Southeast Asia, whereas if you were on the western side of India, Afghanistan and Persia are much more poor areas than Southeast Asia. For crowding score, we gave it a 3.5. Maybe this should be a little bit lower by virtue of like Saptagram. I know we're bringing up them repeatedly, but they're like right next to each other. They're right on top of each other. But I do think that if multiplayer lobbies are playing intelligently, that you'll have a lot of people in India if they're playing like in a sort of competitive way, and so India can get a little bit crowded, but I think if people are just kind of playing, let's call it thematically, India will be really empty, and so you'll either kind of have a free lane or not, depending on this, and I don't know necessarily how to evaluate it, but we gave it a score of 3.5. For the multiplayer military bonus, it's just a repeat of the military bonus, and for benign, we gave it a score of 5. I don't think people will be that spooked by an Orissa pick, even though it's a really strong pick. You will notice, generally speaking, as the picks get stronger, they get spookier and spookier. I think Orissa's really strong without being tremendously scary, and so I don't think you're necessarily going to get singled out picking Orissa, and you'll have a reasonable kind of expand early period in multiplayer. So we do have Orissa with a score of 4.34. So for the next 3, we are going to go through them relatively quickly because they are the European countries, and we have a rather extended discussion in the other video, which will be in the link below. And so because of that, we are going to spend less time on them here, but we have in 9th place with a score of 4.36, England. England specifically used to be, or when we had made the initial video, they had a lot more benefit from initiative being a lot better, but they do get infantry power at game start, they get extra levy power at game start, and so they have this really strong levy force. They are just kind of counterposed with France, whose levies are strong because they're cavalry, and cavalry got buffed since the last video, and so that is a bit of a factor. England will have content in the form of additional max tax, which is quite nice. This is coming from their unique law, which is not present here. And they will also have the formable of Great Britain, which will have a very, very strong government reform, the strongest in the game in the Shires of Scotland. They will also get some good production bonuses towards kind of the end of their tree, giving them tools output. They also have one for cloth output that is quite strong. They also have the best age 6 unit in the game, in experimental riflemen, who just get an enormous amount of flank flanking and also 11 initiative, which is kind of crazy. Initiative's not that good, but you have an infantry unit that has more flanking than a cavalry unit, and this is really, really strong, I think. And so if you do get to age 6, it's going to be quite powerful. You have some really strong stuff going on for you, and you also have some unique content and buildings, stuff like the Globe Theater. Although I haven't managed to build this, it is giving a very strong effect. Next up, in 8th place, with a score of 4.4 overall, we have Castile. Castile is going to have 35% tax efficiency. That's its biggest eco bonus. They also have this monthly prosperity, which is actually very nice for the early game. Will set you up for gaining a lot of development. They will have a lot of naval bonuses as well, which is going to be pretty nice. At first blush, it doesn't look like they have much in the way of land unit bonuses, but that's going to be they also have production efficiency at a couple spots. Really, really strong government reforms, like a little bit of free legitimacy. They have a couple of freebies. That's one of their sources of tax efficiency. This is a very strong one as well. Going to be giving you monthly legitimacy, centralization, crown power, quite a big chunk. Here's a freebie, free government reform with production efficiency. And so they just have a lot of things that just add up to an enormous combination. Here's more monthly legitimacy, very, very strong. And then they have this Iberian group, which is going to have a bunch of stuff that is quite strong as well, and is going to give them their units. Specifically, the one is, I think the Terra show's in here. Oh, I guess maybe not. But they're going to get a bunch of unique naval units. They're also going to have access to the overseas lieutenancy and viceroyalty, which are incredibly difficult to evaluate, but are effectively urban bailiffs that are only overseas, which I think is actually just like a building that is quite strong. You could do some weird stuff on them, like switch to Navarran or switch to Basque culture relatively easily, although Basque has been nerfed. They used to give a ton of stuff. Now they just give a ton of stuff, but I guess they just reduced the numbers on all that stuff. This is a kind of within what you could do, and you also have this continental divide that is quite strong, allowing you to make use of plantations, and you have a really good location for a capital where you will be projecting in 1, 2, 3 on North Africa, and 4 directions towards Aragon. So Castile very strong. And then with a score of 4.44, we have France. France has, on the eco side of things, basically unlimited max tax on the peasants, and I think they get 20% burger max tax, so that's very strong. And so you just really value tax efficiency because it's multiplicatively effective with that, kind of like the reverse of Castile in that regard. We are going to have a little bit of Diplo rep, and then we're going to have the noble levy size. I think you have another 50 to 100% from your privileges that you can give out, and they have extra cavalry combat ability, and so your levies, and you have like the biggest pop in all of Europe. This is one of the main ideas. This is why France is the strongest of the Europeans. You're going to have an absolutely insane levy force early on in the game. Basically, for the first 3 ages, you're terrifying. Army morale 20% early on. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff. Cavalry power 10% early on. Relatively early. I guess age 3 is not early anymore, so you're going to have some good stuff. Tax efficiency is going to be nice. And you have a lot of good government reforms as well. I think that this kind of it for the insane modifiers. I guess legislative efficiency and also discipline is quite nice at the end here. But you're going to have, this is going to be like some of the examples of some stuff you get. You are going to have, or this is an example of the 20% max tax for peasants. You can easily get 100% max tax on peasants. You have a little bit of a bumpy start. I think their start should be a little bit bumpier than what it is, but they just have very strong stuff. There's the 20% max tax on burgers there as well. Max tax on burgers being the kind of most powerful max tax. I do think that one of these is like a layup freebie. The Louis legal code is going to be possible government reforms and also proximity cost. Notably, Crown of Castile gets proximity cost law that's effectively plus 5% proximity cost because they get it over a law category where you can get generic 5% proximity, but they're going to all have kind of access to some of this stuff, and it's going to be very strong. The big thing, though, is your pops. You just have the most pops. You can integrate everyone really easily, and France is just absolutely the strongest country in Europe. I think the fact that Castile and France are so close in score is maybe a little bit misleading, because I think France is quite a bit stronger than Castile. Just that's the way we shook out in terms of how we were ranking them. Very strong in Europe, and is going to be our 9th, 8th, 7th place country here for France. Alright, so in 6th place with a score of 4.52, we have the Ottomans. And the Ottomans, let's jump into ratings, are just very polarized, because what they have that is extremely strong is they have the best content in the game with a little bit of an asterisk that is quite strong. They have a total of 25% proximity cost reduction over land, and most other efficient or really good eco bonuses like tax efficiency, production efficiency, and also max tax. And for the military bonuses, I think they're just unambiguously the best, and it's by such a large margin that the next highest score is a 5.5. England, we're giving the second highest score, and Orissa, incidentally, the third, but this is just, they hit it out of the park. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at their content, because this is going to be really what we're writing home about for the Ottoman Empire. So kicking things off, these first couple texts, not really that great, but actually Ukbe, we didn't try out that much in terms of subject type. That's kind of like a weird one. You create an army-based country, but we have the discipline is kind of the first thing you notice, and then you get deja vu because you notice there's discipline down here, and you're like, oh, it must just be a duplicate. I mean, these are in the first 2 ages, 2 discipline things. That's crazy. That's weird. Except they just get two discipline things in the first 2 ages, and so you will just be absolutely running over people with like 130% discipline when you count all the other sources of discipline that you're going to reasonably be getting in the early game. I suppose you will have more Greek nobles, and so you won't get as much from primary culture noble percentage, but like really it's just kind of a bit of an insane thing. You're also going to have building costs very early on. It's going to be very nice early on, culture capacity. You can do some stuff to kind of deal with the fact that you're like all Greek. It's all Greek to me, kind of in terms of the lands you're conquering. Accepting Greek is going to probably not be on the table unless you do some funny business. And we have a very strong cavalry unit in Age 3. You're going to have extra flanking, and then you are going to be a heavy cavalry unit. You're not going to take extra damage, but you're going to get light cavalry unit type of initiative, and so you're going to get in there, do a ton of damage. Age 3, you're still going to be very solid. Happy to see this in Age 3 and happy to use it. Age 4 is when cavalry starts falling off. A little bit of trade efficiency. Trade efficiency just in general is not the strongest modifier. And then here we also have speed of integration. I don't think this is your only source of speed of integration, and you should be integrating some land yourself, except you shouldn't, because you have unique content that gives you integration for free, along with free stability. So we'll get to that, though, when we talk about unique content. We have the discipline, of course, we talked about before, and we have slave raid efficiency, and the fact that you can raid for slaves. You're going to have this not very good privilege that you can slot in. I don't know if you start with it. If you start with it, you maybe want to take it off. Decentralization's kind of a little bit nasty, but okay. Extra sailors and manpower, because if we didn't have a unique barracks, if the unique barracks wasn't enough, we get tolerance of heathen beliefs. It's going to be very strong for us because we're going to be expanding into the Balkans, generally speaking, and so this will give you a lot more satisfaction, which will be helpful. Cultural capacity as well. We also have legislative efficiency. We take less antagonism, and just in terms of keeping the antagonism low, I don't think any other country that's remotely close to the Ottomans. We're going to see why, but that's one source of it. And here's the first source of proximity cost, minus 10%, Age 3, very strong. Improved relations, plus 20%, another source of being able to expand. Improved relations is going to be useful for keeping antagonism low on various targets. We are going to have this policy, which, another 10% of proximity cost reduction and 10% tax efficiency. It's going to be in legal code, which, if I recall correctly, doesn't have anything too crazy that you're replacing. You're not replacing good things, that is, or especially good things, and so this is going to be straight value. On some of these policies, you're replacing something that's really good anyways, and so it's not as good as it looks. Diplo capacity, not important. Stab if cost is going to be nice, definitely worth researching. Army attrition's not important. Max literacy for Berg is a little bit more development for you. Nobles power is probably not that important. A little bit more trade efficiency. And then we have loyalty of subjects is actually quite a nice modifier. I do think that there's another one of these where it's showing off a thing that we get. And there we have an estate privilege that gives tax efficiency. Very nice. Also gives additional levy size. It is a little bit late to the party. And then we also get the Janissary barracks in the Second Age. And this is going to be an amazing source of manpower. The normal manpower building, or in this age, the armory, gives 10. This is especially relevant in multiplayer. You will be able to field way larger regular armies. And to be fair, regulars kind of suck at this current point in time in the first 3 ages, or maybe 2.5 ages. But if regulars ever get better, having more manpower is going to be insane, and also your top end on manpower is going to be really, really good. It does require slaves to man, but okay, this is what we're going to be doing. And then we have Janissaries units from ages 2 to ages 6. And these are going to be stronger than regular. They're going to take less damage. And I think they're all the same in terms of they just all take 10% less damage. If I recall correctly, which I might not. And so we'll just kind of peruse through quickly here, but I do think it's, yeah, they take 10% less damage. Just very solid. That's not why their military is insane. They do have that insane cavalry unit, but here we're starting to get into some government reform stuff. Cavalry power, cav maintenance costs. All right, fair enough. Maybe we play with this in the Third Age. It gets even bigger. 20% cav power and maintenance costs. Okay. I see you. I see what you're doing. We have one that is a freebie. Free government reform will decrease noble power, give you extra education on heirs, and counter-espionage. Counter-espionage being the less important one. Oh, look, another freebie. Although, is it really free? Because max literacy on slaves is a negative modifier. I still think you slot it in, but okay. If it's free, it's for me. Next up, look at this one. Another free government reform. Efficiency of cabinet in exchange for expected cost, courts, and noble satisfaction. Probably worth using, but look, another free one. This one gives infantry power and infantry maintenance costs. Infantry maintenance cost is going to decrease the amount of manpower you use. If you are stacking other sources of decreased costs, with this, they will have increasing marginal returns. And it's free. If it's free, it's for me, baby. Here we will have one that will give us a development that is notably just a 60% increase off of baseline development. This one, unfortunately, is not free, but is also giving production efficiency and stab investment, and okay, that's going to be very solid. It's a major reform, though, so only one of those. This one is going to be another major reform that you're not going to slot in. You're going to pretend it doesn't exist. This is going to be another major reform. Probably not going to use this, although military tactics is nice and is the other one. And here we have the legacy of Osmond. Now, I know what you're saying. Generalist, you're going to say that's free, and that's true. It's free. But also, this used to be the best in the game because it used to just give 5 flat control. Even still, monthly control plus 5% is kind of a funky modifier because you can use this in conjunction with the increased increased province control cabinet action, which will give you around 2 monthly. And so you will get 7 monthly. And so what this means is, technically speaking, I know it's a ton of micro, but you can juggle that around and give like 14 provinces plus 10 control. That's a lot of micro, but this does introduce that play pattern. And also we get speed of integration. Okay, so we already have a source of that. So now we have like plus 50% speed of integration. Once again, it's free. Also, the cabinet seat, that's free too. And then antagonism received, minus 33%. Minus 33%. And we already have other sources of that from our legislative efficiency. And so we are getting into the realm and territory where we're not going to piss off neighbors by going after people, especially if you lean into it more and stack even more stuff. Legacy of Osman, just absolutely insane. We also do have a couple other things, a little bit of tax efficiency. There's also an event for the like Silk Road thing that is going to be powerful, that's going to give you powerful eco bonuses. I forget what it gives you exactly. I think it gives you trade efficiency, but there's 190 dynamic historical events, and there's a ton of stuff going on for you. And then you have kind of on top of this, in terms of the unique content that is really, really strong for you. I guess we'll get to it to some extent when we'll get to it, but we have the rise of the Turks. I think if we just unpause and take a month, we will peel it off, but the rise of the Turks or the Ottomans is going to be a journal that is going to give you a bunch of stuff, including the ability to create claims. And one of the events you get from this when you're integrating something or just to own territory that's not cored just gives you free stability. And I kind of count this in with their bonuses, although to some extent it's also just with IO/situations. And you get a ton of free stab at the beginning of the game. You get the ability to invade people. You are streamlined to get free kind of subjects of this type of thing. And there's just a lot going on here. But let's jump back in. Oh, by the way, this situation is free. But let's jump back into the ratings here. Let's jump back into the ratings and talk about things a little bit. Population, we are getting 2.3. They have a starting population that is not extremely high, 682k, but they are getting an additional bump because they can take slaves. To be honest, here's the thing. Being able to take slaves is kind of this dynamic that is going to scale incredibly well. And like, if you fight one person in India once, you're going to take like 100,000 pops. And so it's very difficult to evaluate. We've kind of given a quarter point here for this. That might be grossly under kind of scoring your ability to take slaves as a mechanic, which incidentally Mali can do as well, and Mali is getting the quarter point. For resources, you're pretty solid. You have some okay resources in Anatolia. In your natural expand of Byzantium, you're going to start seeing there's a little bit of gold, there's 1 gold, and then into the Balkans there is quite a bit of gold and silver. You do have a couple premiums here and there. You have like 1 source of mercury. It is going to be quite nice. In fact, let's actually just take a look for the resources geography expands, kind of look at these all together. But for resources, we have a score of 4. For geography, we have a score of 4. And for expands, we have a score of 6.9. So let's jump back into the game and take a look at this, because just repeating what resources we know they have is not going to be as instructive as showing. We have a ton of cotton and we have a ton of silk, so really good for the textiles. In terms of the province sizes are decent. Not anything too huge, but you're going to have a lot of overlap between them. You have a lot of sources of iron, nice and spread out, so this is going to be nice for being able to make tools and this type of thing all throughout Anatolia. You have some wool and some livestock, kind of a preferred food, but not a tremendous amount of premiums, just a lot of mediums in the silk and the dyes. And then we kind of get over to the Balkans, and you're going to see quite a bit of gold and silver. There's going to be an event that gives like Serbia more silver, basically at game start, so I think there's another source of silver in there, and so nothing too crazy. Now, as far as your geography goes, I think you move your capital to the Constantinople, right? And if you're playing Theme, this is good. It's going to be from Constantinople. You have a pretty solid ability to push, control in multiple directions. You're going to push up towards this direction. You're going to push down towards this direction. Navally, of course, you're going to push around the loop here, around here, and then also you have decently low friction, trying to get to Bursa and then kind of working your way in here. In particular, you're really dependent on natural harbors, but there are a ton of natural harbors that you can utilize to be able to get into places easier, and so the presence of natural harbors is really going to help you out. Especially, you do have kind of this open flatland up here in the north, and so this flatland, or this should help you get in there. There's a few rivers all throughout, so you're going to get some Poundlock Canal kind of corridors, this type of thing, but also just in terms of what you have going on, you have a lot of plateaus and hills, and so your kind of top end is not necessarily super there. As good a location this is for pushing, the combination of not having a lot of you know, grasslands and having a lot of hills and forests and this type of stuff, the terrain is a little bit rough, but to be fair, you're going to get a bunch of proximity cost reduction that will effectively make this like just regular flatland grassland for most countries, but you would pop off even harder if you didn't have that. To be fair, you will be able to kind of make use of this territory up here, and this territory up here will be really, really close to you from the perspective of proximity, because you're just going to cut through here, and then you'll be in here as well, and you can build an economic base up here if you would like. It is going to be cold, arid, and then continental. You're going to have a lot of Mediterranean to the south, so good pop capacity, this type of stuff, and you're going to be able to pull a bunch of pops with slaves, and they'll be able to grow in this type of thing. And so you can definitely build up a power base out from here. It just doesn't have like kind of the maximum top end in terms of its value. So Expands had a score of 6.6. A big part of this is you get all this reduction in terms of antagonism. You can expand into Sunni and alternate between Sunni and Orthodox. You have access to additional CDs, and then there are a bunch of soft targets all around you. It is very easy for you to blob up, especially once you get enough power to you know, handle Byzantium. Once you move the capital to Constantinople, you can just run through the rest of the Balkans really easily, and this entire region of the Balkans and Anatolia very easy for you to get. And then you can also push down into Arabia. It's only once you meet Hungary and the Mamluks that you can maybe be slowed down, but by the time you gobble all that up, you should be able to fight Hungary and also probably the Mamluks. It's just not necessarily going to be best to. And then also you have the expansion here. When you go naval and you have Constantinople, really just like this entire circle from like the early game on is going to be useful for you. So really you have not only soft targets, mechanics that help you expand, you also just like can actually make use out of a lot of this territory, and so that is why we have the score of this 6.5. For explosiveness, we gave it a 5. You're just not insane just from the very outset. Like the time it takes you to get an income of 100 gold is relatively high, but once you kind of get rolling, then it's a slow explosion, if that makes any sense in terms of what you have going on there. And once you get rolling, you're just kind of insane. Late game 4.5. This is just because the early game is so strong. You don't have anything like super late that is that good to write home about, but all your stuff you get early on is just like, it's still good late game. Especially the proximity cost reduction that has increasing marginal utility in the late game, so maybe this is kind of underscored. For institutions, we gave it a score of a 6. You're going to be able to pull from Italy very easily, and then you can also expand into Arabia and even pull meritocracy early if you want to. You have good trade with the Mamluks, who often are going to spawn institutions. If you're talking H2, you're not super insane, but a lot of institutions can only spawn in Europe or North Africa, and they spawn prioritized based on pop, and Mamluks have like the largest pop of Europe and North Africa. So in terms of percentage time, a lot of places are going to spawn it in the Mamluks, and so this is going to be, your proximity to both the Mamluks and Italy is really useful. For formables, we gave it a 3. When you're already kind of like the formable, we gave a score of 3. This is one of the weaknesses of this rating system, because like Ottomans have more content than any formable like nation that you have, and then you form the nation, they still have more. And so maybe this should just be different. For international organizations, we gave a 5.5. This is one of the highest scores. We are behind in terms of other nations on this top list. We are behind Bohemia, and that's just because you can form the HRE. So really quite strong. Religion, we gave a 6. I think that Muslim/Sunni is very strong. And specifically, if you get one of the variations where you can take slaves, which is basically if you're in Africa or you're the Ottomans. So dev and pop density, we gave it 2.5. Take a close look at this, but it's not too good. It's not too good. You have decent stuff here, and this stuff will kind of develop well, and this stuff will develop well, but it starts out really low, and your stuff isn't going to get way better, way faster, and you like don't have a lot of pop. You have like a decent amount up here, and kind of in this scrum, and so this is going to be your power base. And to be fair, you can get a decent amount of control there, and so this is going to be nice, but in terms of you making sure that you have a bunch of production efficiency bonuses, it leaves a little bit to be desired. You do have wool here, which is nice. And you have dyes up here, which is also nice, along with the iron. Wool over here, but I think you don't necessarily have the best spots over here. I guess you are kind of getting the silk. It's just this province that is kind of underwhelming from the perspective of getting production bonuses, but maybe we're kind of overvaluing that. It is pretty nice to have a bunch of iron just kind of around where your power base is going to be, and so you do have kind of that going on for you, but you don't have, you know, the development. To be fair, the pop density, you just take slaves, so maybe we should be scoring that differently on behalf of taking the slaves, but as it stands, we have it at a 2.5. For manpower, we have a 3.5. This is kind of a bit of an outlier in terms of other countries we've seen. The highest score we have is Japan, which has really high pop. The reason why this is so high is, of course, the Janissary building. Very strong, very nice. For resilience, we have it at a 3. This is going to depend on your player group a lot, I think. You can kick the Ottomans' teeth in at game start pretty easy if you are a really strong country that can see them at game start. I assume that most multiplayer rule sets will not allow this, and the Ottomans will get a chance to get going. Or you'll just Thunderdome with Biz at the game start, and you'll have to play a game of Diplo to try and get people to help you out or something like this. I don't know exactly how that rolls out, but I do think that they are easy to mess with. They cannot defend themselves at game start, but once you get going, then I think they're very resilient. So a bit difficult to score for crowding. We gave it a 3. I assume in a lot of multiplayer lobbies, someone's going to play Biz and someone's going to play the Mamluks. The Mamluks are scary. Biz is right next to you, and it's going to be a little bit awkward. Military bonus, of course, you just carry it over, and benign, we gave it a 1. This is the worst score for multiplayer for benign. I think that the Ottomans are very scary. I'm terrified. They have so much bonuses. It's like, make the pain go away. It's all free for them. And so I think that you probably should try and deal with the Ottomans if you're anywhere near them and kill the baby in the cradle, so to speak. Next up, with a score of 4.56, we have the Mamluks. I think it's worth noting that in our pre-release build, or on the pre-release build, I think we have them at 2nd or 3rd place. They're at 5th place now. They got nerfed before release by quite a bit, and out of everyone, they have the weakest content in the top 10, and it's not close. We gave them a score 3 across the board. They got some good stuff, but it is going to be kind of not cutting it relative to some of the other nations, and so let's just take a quick look at their content, because a quick look is all you'll need. You do have 5% proximity cost. This is one of the better eco bonuses. The other eco bonus, which isn't here, that you can't see, is 10% tax efficiency. We are going to get a government reform for this, and this is going to be something, you're going to get a little bit of a trade maintenance modifier, not really relevant right now because trade maintenance is whatever. Early Mamluks are just not kind of that strong a unit, because it's going to be age 1, and then you have reformed Mamluk age 2. You're not going to be using regular infantry at this phase of the game, so it's just kind of dead slots. Efficiency of cabinet is kind of okay. Discipline is one of the better things you have going on for you. Red Sea trade also going to really help you. The extra trade range makes it so that you can range both India and big chunks of Europe. This is quite strong and is one of the better things that they have. Masters of the Nile is also going to be nice because you're going to, this is like kind of their quality of life, why their generic score is high, is because you will not have to be pressured to go decentralized bureaucracy to get your prosperity, or to go free subjects to get prosperity. You have a source of prosperity, and so generally speaking you have to kind of throw one thing to get prosperity, and so having any source of prosperity is nice, but it's age 3, which is awkward. So you might age 2 want to go decentralized bureaucracy, then swap off of it, and once you get Masters of the Nile, something like this. But it is going to be a nice quality of life. Little trade efficiency, range use over sea is a nice modifier. I do think that if you stack a lot of it, it will tend to be better. And so a little bit of RD power, a little bit of market protection, maritime presence, not anything too crazy. This is actually just kind of medium-ish now. The Mamluk barracks used to give 25 guys, now they give 10. And that is really significant nerf. They got nerfed before release. This was one of the big things to write home about, and now it's just so much less. To be fair, you can still build a ton of them. You could still generate a ton of manpower relative to the Europeans, but this is like so much diminished relative to what it used to be. Their content, they also used to have 20% tax efficiency. I think the proximity might have used to be 10%. They really just kind of got like cut in half in terms of the power level that they got, and I was kind of a little bit sad about these nerfs, but because I feel that they died for the sin of pops. Mamluks just have really weak content, and the reason they got nerfed is because of pops. Not their content's not the part about them that's strong. It's the pops. But let's get to the next thing. Alright, so we actually adjusted a couple scores real quick. We gave them a little bit of a bump in pop and also resources, and we took them down a peg in terms of explosiveness. But let's get into talking about their population score 4, resources score 4.5, and geography score of 6.5. Jumping into game, we can take a look at the resources first because we're on that map mode. You get some very strong resources in the cotton and the sugar, and normally this would not be a source of such a high score, but virtually everything is on the fertile Nile Delta, which they updated the UI to have all these plus marks, which is incredibly useful, but you notice all of these places are going to get 25% output, which is incredible and makes these going to be a lot more valuable. This is a new UI update. I knew that some of these had fertile Nile Delta. I didn't realize it was basically all of them, and so that is going to be quite valuable. I think there's also, yeah, silver mine over here. Hell yeah, brother. This is going to also get a bonus. Anyways, back to Egypt. You have basically medium pluses in the sugar and the cotton, but they have extra production efficiency, and also, and this is kind of a weird thing to evaluate, the amount of levels you can get in these, it just tends to be a lot higher. Maybe the score is a little bit aggressive. I think it's slightly aggressive, but per expand, when you have 25% output, that's really, really valuable, especially early on. You can see our output per level is 1.4 as a result of the modifiers we've stacked and also fertile Nile Delta, and so every expansion is going to be worth quite a bit more. And for resources, or for pops, we have effectively less pops than France by a little bit, and a higher score than them, because once they integrate at least one subject, they'll be higher pop. But ours is very tightly located, and we can take slaves. And the tight location is going to be really nice, because you have them all under a higher control, which is going to be more crown power, but also building really tall in one area. It's not just that it has high control, or high control is like a somewhat obvious like thing, where you're going to be getting a bigger contribution to the tax base, but the proportion of your economy that you have in high control is going to matter, because when you have low control economy, it deflates prices and reduces the profit in the high control economy. And so being able to build really tall in kind of a central area is really important. And they, unambiguously, you have the most densely packed, like, kind of power base as Egypt, which this is an advantage geographically speaking, having them all together like this. That said, you have a little bit of disadvantages in that you can't expand in all directions, and so this is awkward, but at the same time, you will have one of the best naval focus kind of routes possible, especially because they changed it so this corridor, I don't know exactly how this works yet, I just noticed it in my Venice game, the corridor can now use roads, and so you are going to have access to the Red Sea through this location, and so you are going to be able to project control all the way down here really, really well, and then you're going to be also in the Mediterranean. I think you maybe move your capital to the Mediterranean coast. I'm not sure where there's more value, but then you can get control all the way to Anatolia. You could even get it to like the southern boot, to Tunis, very, very easily with a naval focus, and so this is going to be quite strong. There's also like gold and stuff like this down here that I think you can get control to from Cairo. If I recall my game, or a few runs as Egypt a little bit correctly, this will be a source of, kind of expansion for you early on. And the kind of one of the issues though is Arabia is kind of not very good. But you're also at the crossroads of the world in terms of institutions and access to India and other locations. Maybe we're a little bit overranking the geography, but we kind of with the new discovery, I did want to give them a 0.5 bump for being able to access this through a road, because that's a huge difference. Before, I used to think that you would move your capital to Gaza, and then this would have the best Red Sea access because it was the closest to both the Mediterranean and down here. And to be fair, this also might be a decent kind of idea, because also geographically speaking, you're on a continental border, which means, and you can take a lot of slaves, important note, which means you can build plantations. Now, to be fair, plantations right now are kind of a little bit buggy, but plantations are just an absolutely insane building, and you also have cotton in Asia. So you can either move the capital to Asia and be able to build a ton of plantations where you have these monstrous bonuses in the sugar and cotton down here in the Nile. This is one idea. Or you can keep the capital in Africa and be able to, in all the other sugar and cotton you see out here, and there's a lot of cotton in Asia, be able to build plantations there. And so plantations are just kind of an insano building. You generally can build more levels of plantation than are available levels in RGO. What the plantation does is, let's just take a quick look at the building. What the plantation does is it gives you an additional production of that unit, of that good, which, if to be fair, it has inputs, so it's not just free value like an RGO is, but then locally increases the output by 10%. You can usually get something to the tune of, let's say, 15. If you have 15 RGO levels, you can build like 30 plantation levels. And so without the plantations, you would be producing 15 RGOs. And then with the plantations, with 30 plantations, you are getting 30 additional flat, right? So you have now 45 flat, and then plus 300%. That's plus 300% additional output. And so that, 45 flat turns into, 180. So instead of 15, you get 180. These buildings are absolutely cracked. They just haven't worked properly at any point because they don't employ up properly, and so this is a little bit of an issue. It still seems to be the case, but if this ever gets fixed, or even without it being fixed, even with them not working properly and not employing up all the way and underemploying, the building is still cracked. And so you can really, really make use of this as Egypt because of being on this continental border, which is a kind of a significant type of thing. Do we even have you're going to be able to build plantations in Asia, or you move the capital over to Asia and you can build them in Africa. One of the two, but this is going to be really strong and is a source of partly why they are getting such a good score here. Let's jump back into the browser though. And so what we are going to have here is expands. You have 3.75. You can expand in a lot of different directions. You have access to a lot of different places. The problem is your immediate vicinity around your capital, there's not much, especially in the early game, that you can project control to. Before you get the fourth age proximity cost reduction flat for naval, before you push your naval value, and before you start getting a lot of percent proximity cost reduction, you're not going to really have too much in terms of what you can get control to, but at the same time you have a lot of soft expands that you can go for, and you can also colonize pretty well into Africa. So you have some mixed baggish stuff going on in terms of your expands. For explosiveness, we gave it a 4, and we reduced the explosiveness. And let's jump into game and talk about why. You have the three worst privileges at game start. You start with banal lordship slot in, so I think you have to do a couple things, or maybe kind of a couple things. You can push communalism, and then get extra revoke cost there, and then wait for the government reform that gives revoke cost. Or you can look to push plutocracy, and try and strangle out the nobility by decreasing nobles in towns and cities, to decrease their power, to decrease the cost of deslotting this. But banal lordship is the worst government reform, and everyone who starts with it is big sad. You also start out with, I don't know how to pronounce this, but Wycf, payments, minus 10% tax efficiency, completely undoing the bonus you get from the 10% tax efficiency. You kind of get close to game start. I guess you're also getting a state satisfaction equilibrium. You do want to deslot this 50 stab. This is not as painful to deslot, and also not as painful to deslot is going to be communal lands. It is going to cost 13 stab at this juncture, but this is going to be one where it's giving you a ton of decentralization, and that is a little bit of an ouchie. You don't start out with the bad plutocracy one, though, I guess, is something that you have going for you, in that you don't have, whereas the minus max tax for burghers, you don't start with control over monetary policy, but you do start off with all that money-wise and kind of what you can get going-wise early game. You're still pretty good, because even with the minus 5 control, you can still get decent control to all these locations, especially with what you have going on with the rivers, where every location is going to be downstream from the capital, so you're going to be getting the equivalent of a modern road or an age 5 road, and so this is going to be fine enough. I do think you want to keep your capital here for quite some time before thinking about moving it to the coast, the Mediterranean coast, largely because you're getting the minus 30 flat proximity to all these locations downstream in what is your power base and all these good areas. So I do think there's that going on. I think you can spin up the money really fast and you have a big army, but you do have a really awkward political situation at game start, or rather the government reforms, and so that is a hurdle to kind of overcome. Jumping back into the browser, we do have late game 2. You get nothing later on. There's just nothing in your content. Egypt went into decline, historically speaking. This is somewhat fair enough. I think that they should have way better content, because this is basically the height of their power, and their decline was a century later, and it's no foregone conclusion that they should just have bad times, and they just have bad times. They have really weak content just in general, and I feel that pops are just insanely strong, and they are in Europe, or they influence Europe, and this is why they got nerfed. And okay, continuing on, institutions 8, slam dunk. You get a lot of institutions spawning on you, because you have the highest pop of the criteria that we discussed with the Ottomans. A lot of institutions can only spawn in Europe or North Africa, and you have the highest pop of anyone in Europe or North Africa, so you tend to spawn a lot of institutions. On top of that, you have the extra trade range, that 33% trade range, and so you can reach Italy very easily, so you can pull institutions very easily, and if you go naval, you can pull institutions even from Paris or England easily. And then on top of that, you can pull meritocracy earlier than anyone in Europe, and it's not even close. And so you have by far the best institutional access of any country, in my opinion. If you are playing as the player, you'll spawn a lot of institutions as well. So, yeah. For formables, we gave it a 4. You have an easy time forming Persia. It's relatively soft. Maybe we shouldn't have given a point for the formables, because this is a little bit cheeky. But okay, we're not counting formables as very high in our weighting, just half a point. For international organization situations, we just gave it a baseline 3. It doesn't have anything bad. It doesn't have anything good. I think in theory, Egypt's content should be a lot better, and then they should have a monstrously bad situation is maybe the way that they should be handled. For religion, we gave them a 6.5. We gave them a little bit of extra juice relative to the Ottomans. They're both Sunni, but Ottomans kind of start out with a little bit of a worse situation in terms of the pops that they tolerate, although to be fair, maybe it's not worse because they get a big dhimmi estate, but I think you want either the dhimmi estate to be overwhelmingly large, or you want it to be really small. And Ottomans start with a half and half situation, which I think is kind of not good, and that's one of the reasons why we scored Ottomans as a 6 rather than a 6.5. Although to be fair, maybe Mali should be a 6 as well. For dev and pop density, I don't think we need to jump back in, but they just have they have absolutely insane. Let's jump back in. They have absolutely insane density. The density is better than, if you want an example of pop density, you come to here. This is the pop density, because considering all of our locations, we have a bunch of locations with really low pop. We have a bunch of locations with really, really low pop. They're all here. And so this means that you get a really high control average over your area in terms of the pops because of this. You also start out with decent enough dev, but this dev is going to go up by quite a lot because you're going to have a really good score because you're going to have river flowing through everywhere and also farmlands. And so your development will also get huge as well. This is a really, really strong advantage, and it makes you scale really well into late game. You can just have absolutely monstrous production. The only thing you're kind of, I guess, annoyed about is you don't have any iron really kind of in this scrum. I think you have a little bit of iron, downstream here, and you have a little bit of iron in areas where you're not going to have a lot of pops, and so this is the thing that you would complain about. But you're going to have the stuff for the textiles at the very least, and the fiber crops are going to be somewhat nice. You have a mix of livestock in there. Yeah, it's mainly just the lack of iron. The alum, unfortunately, isn't like connected, so you're not going to get the dyes super easily, but okay, it's fine enough. You have a very, very condensed pops, and this is a really strong advantage, generally speaking. And so jumping back in, I think that we are kind of getting into the multiplayer modifiers, and so here's something I would like to point out. The Mamluks have the absolute best multiplayer adjustment out of anyone. I think that nobody can push around the Mamluks. You really get to dictate things. Your way in geographically is like an absolute nightmare for someone to try and get in multiplayer. Like, just in terms of like the logistics of attacking the Mamluk player, you can, if you are winning in the ocean, you can have a monstrous amount of forts. And you were also going to have access in like two directions. Now, to be fair, needing to build navies on two sides is maybe, I guess, a sufficient enough downside, but you built the bulk of it in the Mediterranean, I think. The land way you approach Egypt is just like impossible to get through. Like, if we look at like from a fort perspective, there's so many like just one fort chokeholds, and so, you know, one fort chokehold here, like one fort chokehold like 8 provinces in a row here. And so with a very few amount of forts, you can make it just impossible to approach you by land. And it's like you're playing on an island without actually needing to play on an island, and you have access to them, but they don't have access to you. And as they try and push through the land, you can go in and land behind them and this type of thing. And, I mean, okay, maybe you can't generate as much sailors as someone like Italy or something like this, and then you have to fight Italy, but like, once they get there, you can also just have this monstrously large army. So, like, logistically speaking, it seems... I don't know how anyone attacks Egypt. Like, it just seems like an absolute nightmare. But jumping into the scores and the ratings, for manpower, we have a 5.3. This should actually be a little bit lower. Let's reduce it to a 5. Or actually, maybe it's like a 4.75. They have a really high population. Let's put it at 4.75. The reason why is I don't think we reduced that since the Mamluk building was nerfed. We still have them in the same number 5th ranking. But we are also going to have a resilience of 7. This is kind of what we were talking about. I just think you can't, like, in terms of countries that just like cannot be messed with at game start, I just think no one can do anything to the Mamluks, and the Mamluks can interfere in a lot of ways. To be fair, the Mamluks kind of need to go through sea, and so the Mamluks' ability to exert influence is maybe going to be less than someone like Hungary or Bohemia, who is just kind of in the mix in Europe, or to the extent that you can influence Europe. But the Mamluks can also march to India, and so they can influence stuff in India. And like, in terms of the map, in terms of what they start with, discovered, you can influence quite a bit more, right? India doesn't start discovered for Europe, so Europe can't, at game start, influence things. And the Mamluks are just like the ultimate kingmaker if you want to. The thing about Mamluks is just like your expands are bad early game, and so like you don't necessarily need to throw your weight around, but you could if you wanted to. And so you could do favors early on. For crowding, we gave it a 6. There's no one on top of the Mamluks. The Mamluks are just insane. Like, the only crowding you have is potentially Ethiopia, which you could just run over, and then the Ottomans, you both being able to benefit from Anatolia. To some extent, you can also benefit from Tunis and Italy, and so if there are players in these regions, I guess that's a sort of crowding, but functionally, you start pre-expanded, and so you're not really worried about the crowding. You don't have strong military bonuses, and for benign, I don't think they're benign, but I don't think anyone's like, oh, we gotta deal with the Mamluks. I mean, maybe the Europeans all call a crusade and they decide to just dogpile you, but I think that's probably a Diplo failure if you get, like, a really large number of players dogpiling you. And I think that at that point you just try and find allies and play Kingmaker and try and turn them against each other, and that's like a Diplo failure more than like the country is weak. I think they're just incredible spot in terms of multiplayer, and they have by far the biggest multiplayer adjustment score as well here. They just have they have interesting and weird limitations, but the Mamluks overall very strong, with a kind of new score now that we've adjusted some numbers of 4.58. Next up, with a score of 4.61, we have Vijayanagara. Notably, the 6th through 3rd place are all really close in score, but we do have Vijayanagara with a unique content score of 4. Again, you're benefiting from all of the Asia tech. You are going to have an eco bonus of 3, and you are going to have a military bonus of 3.3. Some pretty nice military stuff early on, and so if we were going to give some weighting towards being early, this would be kind of maybe a little bit higher, but currently we're not thinking of things as much in terms of do you get it early, but let's take a look. In particular, Vijayanagara was did get nerfed quite a bit before release relative to where they were before on some of this stuff. Kind of stories similar to the Mamluks, where I think they got nerfed because they had a lot of pops and their content wasn't especially strong, and now it's just a bit weaker. But we do have proximity cost minus 5%. This was 10%. Proximity cost, a very, very strong modifier. Stronger the more of it you get. Of course, the Ottomans get 25%, but we are going to get 5%. Does a good job offsetting some of the plateaus that we have. We also get levy size plus 10%, nice early. Also nice is the cavalry power and artillery power early. So you have a really kind of nice scrum of early game techs for just the very beginning being quite strong with what you have, and you do have a large amount of population, so this is going to be good. And now we have kind of a little bit more unique thing for Vijayanagara, which is the Bund, which gives 10% local food production and a little bit of extra pop capacity, and you can get multiple levels. And this makes it so you can urbanize literally everything and not care about food. Now, there's other reasons to not urbanize stuff, but this is kind of a little bit of a crazy building and difficult to evaluate, but when you have plus 100% food production locally, and you have a large population, you just stone can just like build you probably actually just urbanize literally 100% of food provinces. Maybe you don't with the wool because you want it for the production or something like this, but you definitely can. The Bund is kind of a crazy building. I do think it has the requirement of being on a river, but there's tons of rivers in India, so it's kind of whatever. Next up, we have Diplo capacity, not a big deal. Market attraction, not a big deal. Cultural tradition, not a big deal. And you're noticing a little bit of a trend here. Culture capacity is actually, this one's actually decent. Accepted culture cost, culture capacity. But with a recent change that they made to the game where you integrate subjects and you have automatic cores if they had cores, really invalidates the value of this. I hope that they kind of change that back, but okay. Next up, we have Tolerance of True Faith. Is going to be quite nice. I don't know the Avatar meta that well. I wish I knew it a little bit better, but I think that you don't go the Avatar route anyways, and you go the self-control route, which we did take a look at when we looked at Orissa. You have Stab Decay, kind of a little bit late for that. The State Satisfaction Equilibrium, nice enough, and Prestige. So really, really front-loaded in terms of the power level and what you're getting. Not present here, that is a thing, is they are going to have a law that it gives you 10% tax efficiency. That's going to be really good early on. But I think in age 4 is the age that you get the vanilla replacement of 5% procs reduction, at which point you probably prefer that to the 10% tax efficiency. And so that's kind of what we have in terms of the content here. Alright, so next up we're going to have population, resources, and geography. Notably, we start with less population than France, but we have a higher score. For example, that's because we are going to get so many easy expands that have so much pop, and we have a ton of pop potential in the region. But let's jump in and take another look. We actually recorded this clip once already, and we just spent so much time repeating ourselves, so we're going to have to do this again. So first of all, you're going to have 2.5 million pops, but all the expands around you have like million plus pops, and they're super soft, super easy. And so to some extent, it's like France having subjects, but also very specifically, you can re-roll for getting Bahmani as a subject. As part of the Delhi content is going to free Bahmani, and sometimes you get it as a subject as Vijayanagara, sometimes you don't. But when you get it as a subject, it's like an extra 5 or 6 million pops as a subject. So this is going to really kind of come into being a lot of pops, and then eventually, there's like 20 million pops up here. The total pop of the Sultanate of Delhi is going to be 40 million. And so you can actually project control up here, and that is going to be a bit of a vibe. Also, here, let's look at the regular geography first. You're going to have this really awkward situation where you're going to have kind of this open area, and then you're going to have, on each side of the coast, a combination of hills and jungle, generally speaking, to move through, with this kind of one low friction area. And also, beyond that, there is no good natural harbor on the coast except for this one, where you have low friction, and the problem, that's a jungle. So you're going to have to kind of make a decision whether or not you're going to be in the center of India and have a good control there, or kind of go out to the side and go naval. I'm pretty sure you want to go land, and I'm pretty sure you just want to be in the center and be really strong, and this is going to be the way you approach it in terms of the geography. But a bigger part of the geography, why they're scoring well, is this. And this is what we repeated ourselves on, because I didn't think of a way to emphasize it, or I couldn't think of a way to emphasize just how nutty this is, other than just repeating myself. But you are, out of 4 provinces, you are going to have over 50 locations. And this does kind of 2 things that's really insane. But let's take a look. 18 provinces, or 18 locations, 10 locations, that's 28, 14 locations, right, that's 42, and then 15 locations, that's 57, right, and this is 4 provinces. And so this is going to be insane on 2 fronts. One, your cabinet actions. You will have absolutely insane opportunities for cabinet actions. Like, for example, you can just increase province control. And you could juggle this around in a circle, and if you have 100% cabinet efficiency, you will just be able to increase the average control of these 4 provinces by rotating it around by roughly 15. This is really strong, right? Because it's 57 locations. Also, you will be able to dev province, and dev province has gotten nerfed a lot since release, or since, like, in terms of the April version of the pre-release build to now. It's like 5% as good as it used to be. And it's not especially good, but it's insane when you put it on 18 locations at once, because like in Europe, it's like 4 locations, so it's like 5 times as good as it is in Europe. And this increases your top end a huge amount, which kind of brings us to the resources as kind of the second reason why these provinces are insane, because these provinces, and there's also a really big one down here too. This, like, but wait, there's more. There's also a 15 stack here. And so just focusing on these monstrously huge provinces, the resources, we have a ton of pepper, right? We have a couple gold piles. We have a few solid mediums in the silk and the dyes, and we also have a good chunk of iron. The resources are great. And also elephants are 10 base price, but the price often collapses, so they're still going to be good for the tax base, but they're not like gold good. Okay. These provinces are going to have production efficiency in multiple things at once, in a very, very strong way. This is one of the worst ones. It's going to have silk, fiber crops, lumber, and livestock as inputs. All of these are relatively good, right? The biggest province, which is, I think, this one here, is going to have in it cotton for the textiles, iron for the entire iron tree. Like, the textiles and the iron are like the big ones, but it's also going to have livestock, lumber, and fiber crops. Right? And so you will get monstrous production efficiency. Like, naval supplies, it's often rare to find fiber crops and iron together. So you're going to have a ton of production efficiency, also in multiple areas. And so you get to have your pick of the litter in terms of getting your production efficiency bonuses. And then you're deving the province, so you're going to have way more top end in terms of, and you also don't start with like low dev either, but you're going to have way more top end in terms of the maximum number of buildings you can build. You can already build to 12 here, but you're going to have a lot of pops. You're going to have a lot of development. The development bonus increases as you get higher tier things, and they're all going to get the production efficiency bonuses. So your ability to get enormous outputs from your urban locations is completely insane. But you're going to have cotton, iron, fiber crops in this province. Coming up to kind of, let's take a look at this one. I think this is one. You're going to have dyes and iron and lumber and gems. This one, you're going to have iron, livestock. This is like one of the worst ones when you have iron and silk and lumber. And then I think this one is also another one of the insane ones. You have silk, regular cotton. So for either just a regular cotton built or regular cloth or fine cloth, you're going to be very good. And then you have iron as well. And so it's just this absolute aberration. There's no other place like this where your cabinet actions get to be so insanely efficient. And it's just kind of warping for the experience of Vijayanagara, because when you play lean and tight and you're just going to annex this scrum of stuff, it's going to be very, very strong. Not to mention, when you conquer and you release subjects, you just release them one entire province at a time. They're reasonably big, and then they use Dev Province a lot. So you see where this is going in terms of like your top end is just insane. And then you also eventually get access to up here because there's kind of a vein of rivers through which you can build pound lock canals and low friction. And you can, with enough of these proximity cost reduction modifiers, you can probably get into this area with like farmlands and this type of thing. But by then you're probably so devved up down here that just down here is better. But just really, really insane geographically speaking, despite like this rough weirdness with the hills and the poor natural harbors and all this type of stuff. Despite all this, like, your provinces, like, make up for this type of thing. Okay, for expands, we did talk about it a little bit. You have soft areas all around you, and you can reroll for Bahmani. This is very strong. For explosiveness should maybe be higher here. You're going to get to making 500 gold, or you can get to making 500 ducats within the first 50 years, pretty comfortably. And so maybe this should be higher, especially because you also have soft expands, and if you get Bahmani, that's like a pretty big come up, but okay, we'll just keep it at that. Late game, we have a score of 4.3, and also this kind of leads into formables, where we have the 4. The formable is like really hard to do, because it's India, because it's huge, but you do have access to India or Bharat, just like Orissa does, with all the same kind of modifiers, where the really big ones are going to be kind of at the tail end. Notably, you're getting multiple artillery power modifiers, and you're also getting multiple, where's Harvey Dent? You're also going to have multiple proximity cost reductions. So at the very top end, if you form Bharat, you will have 15% proximity cost reduction, which is quite powerful. And so that is going to be in there for your formable score as well. For institutions, 4.5. Out of the locations in India, this is the easiest one to pull institutions. And you will get institutions... to be fair, the AI has stopped getting institutions from Mecca to Mecca a little bit in the most recent patch, so it might be a little bit difficult to evaluate, and maybe you don't deserve to be on par with Hungary. But if the AI is... kind of relatively active about getting the institutions to Mecca, you can range Mecca. Just barely, but you can range it if you make a market in Vijayanagara, which I think you have to because you have really low market access to begin with. And this is an important detail, but it's going to be good. The formables we talked about, IO situations, you benefit from the fall of Delhi, so we have a little bit of a bonus point there. Religion, pretty solid with the Hinduism. We talked about that a little bit more under Orissa, so we're not going to repeat ourselves. Dev and pop density, we have a score of a 5, and so here's the thing. The Mamluks are absolutely insane in this regard. We are getting a bit of a bump on our score. We have decent dev. It's not insane dev, but we're going to dev province on these things, and we're going to have so much dev. And so that's going to be quite good. And it's not like we have poor pop density as well. Obviously not as good as the Mamluks at first blush, but I think that in the long term, you probably just have absolutely insane dev as Vijayanagara, and so I think that the score of 5 here is justified. And then this kind of brings us over to the multiplayer factors, where I think you're going to have a lot of manpower. You have a strong military from the opener, so you're going to be really, really resilient. I don't know what happens if Delhi tries to fight you in the open. That's maybe a little bit of an interesting question, because they have a giga-huge army, but they have problems. So that is maybe a source of you not being so resilient, but other than that, you're not really worried about too much. For crowding, we have a score of 3.5. I think this is slightly better than the score we gave Orissa, because you're not, or no, it's the same score as we give Orissa. The reasons are the same. I think India is a strong region to play in, but people might not want to play it as much. Military bonuses carried over. And for benign, we have a 5. I think that people aren't going to go out of their way to go after Vijayanagar, despite Vijayanagar being extremely strong. So this is one of the more benign picks that is still closer to the top list, because I do think the closer you are to the top, the less benign you look. I think that people, it's just generally not going to be worth the investment to mess around with them. So a multiplayer adjustment score of 4.47, and again, a total score of 4.61. Next up, actually tied with Vijayanagar with a score of 4.61, we have the Sultanate of Delhi. And I probably should have ordered it differently, because just vibes analysis alone, I think I would probably put Vijayanagar higher than Delhi. But for unique content, we have a score of 3.5 with an eco bonus of 5.5. They have some good stuff on the eco, but some of it's like weird, because they have stuff for max tax of burghers and peasants, but they're going to have like 100% dhimmi. And if they swap off of, if they go into being Hindu, they will lose access to the max tax of both the peasants and the burghers. So you have this weird incentive to convert everyone. But if you convert everyone, you actually get an enormous amount of peasant max tax, and also even if you're converting partial people, burgher max tax is going to be good. So you have some interesting things. You also have the Ashta Pradhan, which I haven't been able to slot in game. I haven't had a run go deep enough, but this gives 10% tax efficiency, or you could choose between this and a bonus that gives 5% discipline, as far as I know. So we do have an eco bonus score of 5.5 and 4.8. Let's take a look at some of the things we can actually look at, though, because you can't look at everything. In terms of content, they're going to have some good stuff for Conquest, starting with the Diplo rep. It's going to decrease the amount of antagonism you take. You're also going to be able to have plus 50% cultures capacity. Very nice. Also synergizes with some age, I think age 3. You have an option for admin ideas, gives you +2 culture capacity, so it's going to synergize in this regard, and you don't start out with everything cored, so this is going to be relevant to coring stuff. War score cost -5%. You start out as a kingdom, so you're not necessarily the best in regards to war score cost, but it is a strong modifier. Also very strong is monthly inflation, -0.1. This effectively just doubles your income from minting, because the base rate is -0.1, and there's generally not a lot of sources of this. I think there's a cabinet action later that's super overtuned, but anyways, moving on. You have antagonism received -10%. This is going to be kind of stacking effectively, and can allow for some really good expansion while staying low antagonism. I think that they might have the second most total amount of antagonism reduction after the Ottomans. But okay, you get a little bit of cloth output. That's going to be a nice modifier. Levy size nobles is going to be a little bit late to the party. Road building time. It's going to kind of just be a vibe. Tolerance of heathens is going to be useful, because you will have nearly 100% heathen. And then I think that's kind of what you mainly have going for you. You can also form not Bharat, but Hindustan, but it's going to have all the same things as Bharat. And so this is going to be, it's going to have all the India tech, including the, 10%. I think some of these might have different names, but you are going to have the 10% proximity cost and the late game production efficiency. Just the entire thing is going to be the same. You have, I believe it's in the nobles, the Rajput society is going to be the one that gives 5 to 10% discipline, depending on how many pops you have of a particular of a particular culture. In theory, you could go out of your way to promote that culture, and then maybe even culture flip to it, and then get 10% discipline. I don't know if this works, but this is maybe something that's on the table. And I think you have that other source of discipline too, so maybe you can get up to 15% discipline, which is kind of spooky. And then on the burghers, we do have the Fund the Karimi Merchants, which is going to give you 10% max tax for burgher estates. You also have this one that gives you both max and minimum peasant tax, but that's not going to be relevant unless you flip everyone your religion. But it is a very large number, so you can effectively full tax the peasants if you convert everyone. But this is also just going to be just always kind of gravy. But the thing is you're going to have a very small burghers estate and a very large dhimmi estate. So It's not going to necessarily generate you too much money until you start converting people, but converting people is definitely something you want to consider. Early game, you just definitely keep this in for the minus unrest and the tolerance of heathen beliefs, but eventually you can pull this off and then start converting people to your religion if you like. You also get access to Mamluk barracks, which are going to give you more manpower, but aren't as strong as they were before. Maybe this is worth slotting out. There's another later version of this that I think it might give some positive modifier. I don't think it gives discipline. My head wants to say discipline. The Talkur tax collection, though, is what we were talking about for the cabinet action here, which gives you the max tax for peasant estate. And this is interesting. You have almost entirely... It's not going to matter necessarily because you're going to have almost entirely... You're going to have almost entirely dhimmis, so you're not going to have that many peasants. But if you specifically convert the peasants in your places with really good RGOs, or convert areas with really good RGOs, this is maybe a bit of a thing, because you're going to have plus 35% max tax or something, right? Once you have over 100% of this modifier. And noble estate satisfaction equilibrium 20%. Not exactly a terrible modifier to be having. So we are going to talk about population, resources, geography, and expands. But honestly, I think that this geography score should be a little bit higher here. And I think that their kind of explosiveness / IOs should maybe even be lower, even though it's already at 1. But let's raise the geography a half point, because I do think that, relative to Orissa or the Ottomans, that they have better geography. And so I think it's worthy of a little bit of a higher score. So we're going to have population of 6, resources of 6, geography of 4.5, and expands of 5. To some extent, you're pre-expanded. And so this, at a certain point of size, it becomes really weird to think of your expands, but you also have a bunch of soft targets / subjects to get into. You just can't get into them early because of your unique content, which is a huge variable for Delhi. They're going to have the Fall of Delhi situation, which is an enormous kind of wrench in your game plan. But you start off with 40 million pops, which is the second most in the game. Just after Yuan, which starts off, to be fair, with 91 million, which is a lot more, but 41 million, that's like almost half, and India as a whole has about as many pops as China. So in terms of your uber top end, you're going to have about as much as China. Now, from a geography perspective, you have actually a ton of farmland, grassland, and this is quite nice, and in a good area. And so you can build a really nice power base here. And incidentally, this is where a majority of the population is. So this is really kind of just a smooth experience. You can see here the heat map. There is some that extends down here and over here and this type of thing. But I do think you probably have to give out some of your territory at game start. And I think you are probably should be releasing subjects. This is the approach we have taken to Delhi, where we release 2 or 3 subjects. That way we don't have to deal with the separatist movements, which is part of their content. So I almost think of them as having additional subjects, this type of thing. But you have farmlands, grassland, rivers all throughout, and you're going to get really, really cheap proximity downstream. And you're going to auto-move your capital to Delhi, and Delhi might be actually a good location, because you're going to get minus 30, basically, for like every segment going downstream. And so this is actually really, really nice. And maybe even 4.5 is not high enough, but we're going to keep it at 4.5 for now. As far as resources go, you have the elephants. You have a couple silver over here. That's nice. Other than that, you don't have any of the other premiums, and you are going to have much smaller, even though you have like bigger than the Europe average, because you have places that are having like 6 provinces, or 6 locations in a province. You're going to generally have these smaller provinces, but despite that, as far as resources go, you're going to have a lot of places that have the ability to produce textiles. This is going to be quite nice, and you have a bunch of iron as well in this kind of like upper area. It's a little bit off to the side. You have an enormous amount of lumber, and so these markets will be pretty nice. We're mainly focused on what's here, because I think that this is like where your power base is. You're also just having an enormous amount of dyes, and I think actually a lot of provinces with both dyes and cotton, or a decent amount of these, and these are going to do really well. Or silk and dyes combo, rather, going to be the best for producing fine cloth, like period, with a T at the end. And so you're going to have like Bahmani and this other stuff as well, but your ability to make use of this really early on is not going to be that high. You still have the pepper there. That's going to be a thing. You could trade the pepper. You're going to have an enormous amount of cotton up here. But again, I think that we really think of, like, when we're thinking of Delhi, I think you're also going to have this over here. To some extent, this is actually going to be usable stuff for you. It's going to be in the secondary market here. But as it relates to Delhi, I think this is what we think of as our primary kind of territory. And also a little bit outside of it, where we are going to have the iron off to the edges and the wood and this type of thing. And overall, just very solid resources without being turbo insane. We have the 3 silver and a ton of elephants. That's the primos, and then a bunch of the high mediums, and actually, like, not that many food locations, but the ones we do have are rice, which give 10 food per RGO, so that's going to be quite nice. And you can see the max level is enormous, and when you have really high pops, you can really urbanize everything, so we're going to be really fine on this. And the max level for all these RGOs is incredibly high because of the enormous amount of pops we have. And just, like, taking a closer look at it should give a bit of a better idea. It looks like Egypt, except it extends from here to, like, here, the enormous pop range. A lot of these places start out over-popped, though, and it's an intractable issue when you have sparse vegetation, so, like, they're just perma-over-popped. Like, this 170k is going to have a max capacity of, like, 53. So, like, you want them to move. And I think also in theory, this is a little bit off the beaten path, in theory, you maybe are supposed to fight these guys. They can take slaves and let them take slaves so that the pops could grow again. Just let them repeatedly occupy this location. Maybe that's a little bit too deep in the tank. But overall, you're going to have a lot of good stuff going on here. For explosiveness, we gave them a 1. The fall of Delhi's situation really sucks to go through, and is almost like starting the game 50 years later in terms of just the overall feel, or maybe 35 years later, and so you are not explosive at all, and you might even have to give up territory to start things out. You can get a really strong income coming out of the fall of Delhi, just because you have so many advantages, but going into it, you start with 100% inflation. There's a lot of really bad stuff going on. It is very difficult. You have to avoid death spiraling, and so you have to basically bank all your money, spend your money to deal with the fall of Delhi, and so you kind of really do start late. You're going to have a really good top end, though, because you have a lot of good techs towards the end. Once you get going, you're going to be really strong, and to some extent, I think that you have to juxtapose the early game to the late game to some extent, and you'll notice a lot of people who score really good on explosiveness are also scoring low on late game, and vice versa. Like Russia, you're just waiting for late game. But okay, we're gonna have a score of 6. Institutions, we have a score of 4. This comes down to the Mecca thing quite a bit, because either institutions come to Mecca or they don't. To some extent, you can also range Baghdad with your market, and so I'm not sure Vijayanagara can range Baghdad, but the flip side of this is you have like 3 markets. Here, let's jump in game, kind of take a quick look. You have 3 markets, and the combat market is the one that can range Mecca. It can also range Baghdad. So you have a little bit of flexibility, whereas if you make a market of Vijayanagar, it can reach Mecca, but I don't think it can reach Baghdad. The problem is when you pull it to combat, you have to wait to get it in combat, and then you have to pull it to Delhi, because all your pops are up here. So in order to get 20% of your pops, you have to pull it to at least Delhi, and maybe even these 2. And so while you can pull as fast or a little bit faster than Vijayanagar, the initial bit, you're not pulling it to a market with all your pops in it. So, and to be fair, what we've done is we've released a lot of the locations in combat to subjects. Maybe you're supposed to hold on to them just for institution reasons, but this just generally has been a source of struggle, and where a lot of our testing is on is an environment where institutions seem to go to Mecca more often than they have been in kind of our recent runs, and so I don't know if the AI has been changed and you're not getting it to Mecca quite as often. So that is going to be a bit of a thing. For formables, we gave them a 3.5. They start kind of like preformed. To be fair, maybe they should have a 4 because they have the same one as Vijayanagar. We gave it a 3.5. This is fine enough. For IO situations, you have the most painful situation at game start. I think Red Turban Rebellion might be less painful. Maybe not. I think we gave a score of 1 for both of them, so it doesn't really matter, but, like, it's just awful. For religion, we gave a 5.5 just because you are Sunni, and Sunni's really good, but you start with, like, 100% non-Sunni pops. To be fair, this is actually kind of okay, because you can tax the bejesus out of the Dhimmi. And this is something we're realizing with our Venice run, which we have done since we made these ratings, so perhaps this score should be a little bit higher. We're going to do 5.75. I think the thing is you don't have the same flexibility to convert locations to primarily your religion like the Ottomans do, but the Ottomans probably actually have a worse position religion-wise. We're not going to change the Ottoman score, but the Ottomans' situation is like half and half, and I think you really want one or the other. The thing is, with Delhi, I do think eventually you want to convert everyone to make full use of a lot of your bonuses, maybe, because you can max tax the burghers and the peasants quite a lot. I'm not sure. That's a little bit of a difficult one. For Devon pop density of 6, you have some of the highest pop in the game, and it's also very densely located in those, in that area around your capital at game start, which is really, really nice, and that entire area is on a river. So even though Mamluks are like more densely located, we do have a big kind of preference for this, and also, to jump back in the game, you get a lot of dev from the farmlands, and we still have a lot of farmlands, and okay, Mamluks have a higher density of farmlands. We start with the most dev in the game. Yeah. So this is like the most dev'd up area in the entire game, basically. So you obviously are going to score well on this dev thing. And so we do have a score of 6 there. And then coming into some of these other scores that we have for multiplayer, manpower we have at a 7. I think this is the highest manpower score. China has more people, sure, but you have the Mamluk barracks. I don't think China has a unique barracks, and you can build multiple levels of the Mamluk barracks. So I think you just straight up have the most potential, even after the nerfs to the Mamluk barracks, which is what we put this at 7 initially. I still think you have the highest top end on manpower. Resilience we gave a 3. I'm not sure what happens if Vijayanagara wants to fight you early. I think that's maybe a bit of a rough one. You certainly don't like it because you have other stuff going on, and if you fight Vijayanagara early, if you decide to make an enemy of Vijayanagara as a player, I think that they attack you when you get either a rebellion or another thing going on, and I think you really hate that. I think that that's real bad for you. Also, your levies... currently, levies basically don't get depleted. If that ever gets fixed, you're going to be easy to kick when you're down. So I do think you're in a bit of trouble. Also, if someone plays Saptagram, you better just pray and, like, bite the pillow because they're going in dry. There's, like, no way you're beating, like, 120,000, like, levies. It's just, like, absolute, like, monstrously terrifying. So... You're weak to some sort of stuff for crowding. 3.5 per kind of just India. This is the score we've given for everyone in India. We have a repeat of our military bonus, of course, and benign 2.5. I think if I'm playing anyone else in India and I have the opportunity to dogpile Delhi, I'll kind of want to do it before they get out of their situation, especially because I'm presented with the content, and this is an easy way to diplo. And I think I would want to do this if there's 3 India players, 3+ India players. I think I'm trying to convince everyone who's not Delhi to dogpile Delhi. And if I'm playing Delhi, I'm just crying alone in a corner and trying to turn them against one another or something like this, because if Delhi gets to get going, Delhi's really strong, especially if you convert everyone. Maybe this is part of why we had late game, because also, like, converting everyone is potentially, like, really, really strong with how your setup looks, but maybe that's too deep. It's so many pops to convert. But for Delhi, we, after changing a couple things, we have a score of 4.65, so now we don't feel silly for having a tie. The real reason why we changed the scores. And then there was 2. In second place, with a score of 4.9, so quite a bit ahead, we have Korea here. And I think that there's kind of a sharp distinction between once you get to Korea, past India, and some of these other kind of nations, in that the way that you score institutions is going to really matter here, especially for Japan as well. We only have it as a weight of 2. If you want to score this way higher, then Korea gets a lot worse. But let's talk about their unique content, starting with the fact that they get an event. They get an event that gives you 0.1 research speed. I have not seen any other flat source of research speed anywhere in the game. I'm not saying it isn't there. I've looked through, I think, every single advance, every single estate privilege, and every single government reform, and every single government policy. I haven't seen every single event and every single building. So if it's on an event or a building, there's perhaps another source of this, but as far as I know, this is the only source of flat research speed. And everyone else gets 1 flat and up to 0.2 from the liturgical language. So that means you can get like 8% more than everyone else in terms of flat score. And there's a bunch of percentage score in Asia. I think Asia Tech has like 2 sources of it, or like the religious group of like Shinto, Confucian, all this has 5%, and Asia has 5% or something like this. And so even if you're getting the institutions late, which you're not necessarily always doing, because you kind of can spike spawning some of them occasionally, you catch up in a way that I think other people can't. And there's a bunch of sources of percent research speed, especially every institution you embrace is 5%. Literacy is direct percentage. There's not a lot of sources. Well, there's like no sources of flat research speed. So I do think that that's worth noting. For eco bonuses, there's going to be 2 things that aren't visible when we look at the content, which is going to be Celestial Governor gives some good modifiers, 5% procs. Legal code, there's an upgrade where we will get an additional 5% proximity. That is a Korea legal code thing. We might be able to take a look at that in Celestial Governor and military. Let's jump in and kind of take a look at some of these when we just break it down. So, taking a look, we are going to get a bunch of fort stuff. In multiplayer, forts might be cracked. I don't really know. I kind of don't think so, but this is maybe worth noting. Other than that, we are going to get barracks early game. If the regulars ever get buffed, this is going to be nice, but also we have an early source of barracks, and so this is going to kind of fold into us actually having a really strong Age 2 army. I think monthly literacy is kind of whatever, cultural traditions, whatever. This is going to be an interesting one. We have additional fort defense percent available here, both the land gunnery and the coastal gunnery, also hostile attrition. Kind of a hard thing to get, and so if you are playing like a defensive game against human opponents and like this type of thing, this is like interesting that you could stack a bunch of fort defense and this type of stuff. I don't know how good that is. I have no idea. Hwacha is kind of an interesting one, plus 20% strength damage for a cannon, and I think the current metagame right now for like ages 2 and 3 is your regulars are cannons and cavalry only, and then you have regular, or you use that as like a supplementary unit for your levies, which tend to be mostly infantry. And I think that having a unique cannon that does plus 20% is actually really great. I think they're not going to do as much damage as the cavalry, but they're not going to be like so much worse. Efficiency of cabinet worth researching. Max literacy definitely worth researching. This is additional research speed, by the way. Raw materials output absolutely insane on Korea because they have really good RGOs. Infantry power plus 10% solid. We are going to get more turtle ships everywhere, turtles all the way down, but also naval damage taken minus 10%. Maybe they should even have a higher score for military. It's just they lack like a really good unit when like regulars are good and galleys are just kind of worse than heavies, and so it's like, okay, these things are good enough. RD power and heavy ship power in the 4th age, and then in the 5th age you are going to get tax efficiency 10% and proximity cost minus 5%. And in particular, the 4th and 5th age is when you really start getting the proximity cost modifiers to be very good, and so this is going to be something that is worth noting. Now let's jump in and take a look at some of their other stuff in here. Alright, so for legal code, you're going to start out with already an upgrade, kind of relative to what other people can get. Legislative efficiency and centralization is going to be nice, but you can eventually get to the Joseon code, which is going to give proximity cost, and so this is what we're talking about. There's also the Gorian code, which we start with. I don't know why it's exclaimed there, but this is the source of proximity cost that you're generally not going to have access to, and the stability decay is also really nice. Coming to the Celestial Kingdom, or the Middle Kingdom IO, we are a Celestial Governor at game start, which is also going to give 5% proximity cost, and legitimacy, monthly legitimacy, is going to be quite nice. Also, the Celestial Laws can give us various things to the members of the Middle Kingdom. You can see that monthly legitimacy, we can have also, just in terms of what we start with, a little bit less payments to Overlord. We're actually going to be getting net payments from the Middle Kingdom. We're just kind of cruising through these. Loyalty to Overlord, there's kind of nothing modifiers. We have Celestial Governor giving us the stab, and also a little bit of trade capacity. And this is all just kind of for free, and the laws can change. We just can't change them. But if we take the Celestial Governorship, we can. It just involves you paying a lot of money. But some of these are just absolutely insane. We'll kind of cover these a little bit more when we take a look at Yuan, spoilers, but there is some other strong stuff going on here as well. Alright, let's get into the first scrum of ratings for population. We have a 5. Now, this is kind of a similar effect to India, where you have a lot less pops than, like, Castile, and you have a way higher score than Castile. Well, that's because you can get a bunch of pops on the easy, whereas Castile cannot. Resources, we have an 8. Korea just has the best resources in the game. They might not have the most of the premiums, but in terms of density, it's just absurd. Geography, we have a 6, and expands, we have a 7. Let's jump into game and take a little bit of a look at this. So, starting off with the population, we don't have an insane population. This is true. This is fair. But we have a decent core around where we're going to build, and kind of decent amounts on the coast, and we also have a decent chunk over here, which once we go naval, which we kind of start with pretty good naval, we will be able to push. We start with a 70, and I think that probably what you do at game start is you look to put in harbor administration, so you will be able to kind of make good use of that, and that'll be nice for you. Okay, but with your expands, when the Red Turban Rebellion pops, well, first of all, with the expands, you get you get these guys automatically. These guys here, they will like declare independence, and then you fight them and you annex them, and then you will get claims on all these kind of Koreans up here. I think that, or all the Jurchens up here, and then you will get a personal union on this guy. So you get flavor to expand anyways. But beyond that, you can expand into Japan fairly easily. And when the Red Turban Rebellion pops, you can expand into Yuan very easily. Like, very, very easily. And so you can take a bunch of their stuff. And so when you think about what pop you have, if you want to have this pop, you can have it. And it will also be in Kaesong market if you want it to be. Like, if you don't do any weird market stuff, when you take these, they'll flip over to your market, especially if you they'll flip over to your market, especially if you have a lot of market protection. So these pops can easily be your pops and migrate towards your stuff, and this is really, really strong. And you have, I think, in my opinion, the best expansion strategy overall, especially because relative to Japan, Japan can pick on China too. Japan can pick on China when the Red Turban Rebellion pops. However, Japan sometimes will have to fight their way through Korea if Korea stays loyal, which Korea does not have to fight their way through Korea. And Japan can't expand into Japan, which Korea can. Japan can, of course, expand into Korea, but geographically speaking, you're a little bit more centrally located, and from a naval perspective, you can push to the entire coastline over here, and you can push into Japan, and you can even push over here. So your surface area coverage is insane. As far as the terrain goes, it is a little bit rough in Korea. That's fine. That's just going to be the way the cookie crumbles. Across the way, it is very nice if you wanted to expand there, but we'll talk about that more in a bit. And to come to the resources, this is the bee's knees, the absolute insanity, the bestest of the bestest. The rest is just the restest. It's almost easier to count the bad stuff than it is the good stuff, which is how much good stuff there is. But to start things off, you have an enormous amount of gold. and you have an enormous amount of silver. And to be fair, someone like Japan has more gold and silver, but your density is insane. Japan's not going to be getting control over here anytime close to the early game. They're not going to be getting control over here. You can project control pretty well in Korea to the entire peninsula. And especially if you go naval, right? Because you're going to project up this way, and you're going to project out this way, and it's going to be really, really strong. So, like Bohemia, you have the density, but then you also have a ton of pepper. You have all the high mediums, basically. You have one source of dyes, you have amber, you have pearls, you have the iron, right? You have cotton. Not an enormous amount of cotton. I guess if this could be a criticism, you do not have an enormous amount of provinces that are going to have the bonus on the textiles, and they're not like as centrally located, I guess. And then you're also going to have rare minerals. You're missing tin, but you have copper and lead. You are going to have, for just the ease of playing the market, a very good chunk of lumber, right? We see the lumber coming all the way through, and even a sand. You are going to have alum, which is going to be nice for making dyes. Of course, you do have the one source of dyes. And you're going to have actually an enormous amount of coal, which, while not necessarily super good early game, and maybe doesn't seem super good if you're used to playing in Europe, I do believe at game start you can use it in the porcelain kiln, which is selling for a decent price. If you're used to playing in Europe, you probably haven't seen as much porcelain, but it is half transport cost to move, so it's a good thing to trade, and it's base price of 3. And so you can build a bunch of porcelain early and be good at it. It builds in from the coal and the clay. I think you have a couple provinces, or one province, that has coal and clay in it, both. And so you're going to be really good at that. And then even when you get to the bad stuff, or when you get to food, you have a ton of rice, and you have some livestock, which is insane. The stuff you have is bad is like the legumes and the fish, and the medicaments. And everything else is just like primo, and you're super happy about it. And so you're just going to urbanize over all the legumes and fish, and then you're just going to cry because you have so much good stuff. You also have tea, which is nice in this instance as well. So you just have everything going on for you, and you can expand into Japan and get all of Japan's insane resources, and you can expand into China and get their insane pops, and it's really soft and easy. It's like taking candy from a baby. Jumping back into the ratings, for explosiveness, we have an 8. You can spin up 50 ducat margin basically instantly. China will also pay you money from the Middle Kingdom IO, and you are going to be able to go after China as soon as the Red Turban Rebellion pops, and just enormously expand. It is really, really, really strong. I don't know if anyone else from an eco perspective feels anywhere near as fast in terms of the speed that they can spin up from where they start. And I don't think Japan's maybe the closest, and Japan's got weirdness going on for them. For the late game, we have a score of 3.3. They don't have really too much late game in their tree, unless you want to consider them getting control of the Metal Kingdom, part of their late game. Institutions, we have 2.5. Generally speaking, we have noticed Korea having an easier time getting institutions than China, but this is just slightly better than both Japan and China. Just in terms of what we've observed, we've seen a couple of times that Korea kind of embraces stuff, whereas China isn't able to. It's because they're more densely packed, I suppose. For formables, we have a 3. I think Korea this should maybe be lower, to be fair. This is not a very heavy weight with just a half point of weight, but you can form China now, can't you? So, that's probably the game plan. But, I don't know how that should be counted. For IO situations, we gave them an 8. For two fronts, the Middle Kingdom, we've seen, Korea getting paid out as much as, 400 ducats. Unless they nerf this, I guess we're seeing Korea not ubiquitously as all the hegemons as often on the release build as we did pre-release build, so maybe they nerfed the amount of money you got from Middle Kingdom IO. But that alone is insane. But beyond that, you really benefit from the Red Turban Rebellion, allow you to just, get free, like super free expands. So for religion, we have a 5. To be fair, I don't remember Korea's religion all that well, but you can flip to either China's religion or Shinto at game start, which is good. And Shinto's really strong, so there's that. For dev/pop density, we have 3.5. You have like a little bit of dev, if I recall correctly, but it's like not insane. It's not why we write home about Korea. Yeah, you have, in this scrum, you do have the 30s, which is like much better than normal, but much better than Europe. Like in the 30s is basically the cap, but it's just like right there, and it's not like too crazy. The real issue is you don't have enormous pop density at game start, so yeah. And then getting into the multiplayer ratings, we have 3s in all the right places. Yeah. For manpower, you don't have an enormous amount of pop. Maybe we should have counted this higher. The idea that you are going to expand into China is like less of a given in multiplayer. So I don't really know how to rank it from the perspective of you have a score of 5 on pops, but way less of a score on manpower, especially considering you have your own unique manpower building. This is mainly because I don't know if you always like get the expands or this type of stuff. For resilience, we gave it a 3. Korea should maybe have a higher resilience score. The thing is I think if Japan player is strong and someone playing Yuan is strong, you might have problems. And you're like simultaneously weaker and stronger than both. Both have like issues at game start, but like are like in the abstract stronger. It's difficult to evaluate. Like if Yuan wants to fight you really, really early, they can go about it, I think. I don't think the Middle Kingdom IO just like breaks them, but maybe it does. You start off as their subject. I think they could kick you out of the IO, and that's one way they can mess with you, which hurts you in a couple ways, and then you attack them during the Red Turban Rebellion, but multiplayer people are going to have rule sets about expanding into China, probably. I don't know exactly how that goes. Crowding, we gave it a 3. If there's a Yuan player and a Japan player, you kind of probably feel worse about things, because there's not as much AI to expand into. There's the Jurchens in the north, but like other than that, you're hurting for any type of expands into AI. For multiplayer, military bonus, we just have a repeat. To be fair, we thought the military bonus should maybe be higher and benign. We have a relatively low score. I think Korea's really spooky. They aren't like they aren't like spooky and easily disruptible like the Ottomans or something like this, or like as kind of streamlined into fighting someone like England is. But other than that, this is going to be one of the higher scores. Delhi, of course, is vulnerable. Korea doesn't have an extra vulnerability at game start, but I still think like disrupting Korea or trying to offset Korea in some way, even if it's just kicking them out of the Middle Kingdom, which I think you could do by releasing them. I'm not 100% sure. This is definitely in the cards, because otherwise they start really strong. So we do have a score of 4.9 for Korea, and also a fairly obvious inference as to who's going to be number 1. Finally, with a score of 5.44, we have Yuan, which admittedly has a weird type of way of looking at it, because you have to go through the Red Turban Rebellion, and you're probably going to play as, not as Yuan, but as a different one. I think you can fight through it as Yuan, but I assume you play Chinese warlord and you're looking to unify China. There's a bunch of flavor for doing it really quickly, and then you'll be Ming with all the territory and all the bonuses. And so let's take a look at the ratings. Jumping in, we have, of course, the score of 5.44, unique content bonus of 8. We are including in this the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is just kind of insane, but even without it, you have really good content. And then also a score of 8. You can bring proximity cost to absolute 0. And you have basically every other type of modifier as well. And so you're just very, very strong. You actually don't get a lot of military bonuses, but let's take a look at some of this. To take a look, we are going to get max literacy just right off the bat. So you start off with like the highest literacy in the game. You're going to probably get bricked on research because your ability to embrace institutions kind of sucks, but okay. You're going to get flat legitimacy, keep this in mind for when we get to religion. You're going to get efficiency, head of cabinet, this type of stuff. Is that head of cabinet promotion? Okay, promotion cost. I thought it was efficiency on head of cabinet, which would be insane. Buildings cost and monthly prosperity. You also get prosperity off of religion. This means you can completely throw any type of need for going out of your way to get it. You don't have to do decentralized bureaucracy. Loyalty of subjects, a nice modifier. Possible government reforms if it's free. It's for me. Proximity cost reduction in H2. Yep, sure, 5%. Let's take it. Tax efficiency, also great modifier, 5%. Let's take it. Manpower, good to have. Not gonna have a lot of manpower at that age though, but because it's gonna take you forever to get pro army. But okay, cabinet seat, it's free for me. Crown power, additional modifier. A T output is going to be nice. Auxiliary build cost, kind of whatever. Pop join rebel threshold. If you're expanding, if you do like really, really aggressive expansion, that's actually a really good modifier, but the way I play it's not very good. Salt output 20%. Legislative efficiency, that's less antagonism. They might have more modifiers than Delhi did. We said Delhi has the second most antagonism reduction. That might not be the case. It might be Yuan, but Yuan's just an aberration. Silver output's nice. Fort defense, I think, is that their second fort defense? The red cannon's not a very good unit, but it does do a little bit more damage, and it has higher initiative. Kind of a weird for a cannon to get 2 initiative. If you're going to do an all-cannon army, I guess this would be the guy to do it with. Because the real problem is that they can't get onto the fronts fast enough, and this guy's twice as good at it. Okay, infantry reinforcement cost is less, garrison size up, and max tax plus 10%. Really strong modifier, especially considering they get flavor and laws and events and this type of stuff. Efficiency of cabinet 10%, going to get cultural influence, and some porcelain output. Porcelain output's going to be nice. That's a pretty good to trade. Diplo rep, a little bit more reduction in antagonism taken, and they get, for good measure, 5% war score. So that's kind of what's on what they have, just like in terms of regularly looking at it. But the IO is insane with like a big asterisk. The big asterisk is you pay out to the tribute system a lot, and this is a bit of a painful one. I think at a certain point it's worth it. I also think you get to throw your legitimacy slider super hard, because you get legitimacy that we saw just straight up, but look, we're only decaying 0.11 legitimacy. We also took the liberty of already flipping our religion to Sanjiao, because I think you do this because all your pops are Sanjiao, and then once you have this in place, we have to pay very little for a cost court. Just to kind of quickly go over this religion, the Sanjiao religion is going to give 10% literacy and monthly legitimacy 0.5. You can, as Korea, also swap to this. So this is also going to be very strong. It enables righteousness and harmony, which is going to give you state satisfaction, equilibrium, and monthly control. And harmony will give you, I think the better one is the prosperity and dev, but you can also go the other route and go for the -10 for the estate satisfaction equilibrium. I think that, you just go for the monthly, the prosperity and the dev. What am I saying? So that is going to be something you can do. And then to move on to the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom laws are insane. First of all, like, the base ones you start with are, like, fine enough, but here you have this proximity cost, -15%. This scales based on how much silver you're producing, and can get absolutely enormous. This is super, super nuts, and you can stack enough proximity cost reduction so that you get -100%. And which point you could get control everywhere. So as long as there's not a roadblock of some kind through rough terrain, you can get it everywhere. Literal everywhere. And so that is really insane. They also have just a bunch of really good stuff everywhere. I'm pretty sure most of these are going to have very strong... Here, another source of proximity cost reduction. You have it here. Remember, proximity cost reduction is one of the strongest modifiers in the game. You're going to have a little bit of research speed and legitimacy here. And so we currently are getting a legitimacy decay of 0.1. So we get this, we basically could just kill the slider and not have to pay for it, like it's in its entirety. Or just get any tech that gives legitimacy, of which there is some. And you also get the proximity flat reduction through maritime, which is quite strong. I think you dramatically prefer this over the other option, and so you will be able to push over maritime as well. And so just overall, you just are absolutely insane. You will have a very similar tech tree as well if you go the Chinese route, but there are some things like successors of Genghis Khan, which you will not be getting if you go Chinese instead of Yuan, but instead you will have some of the Chinese-oriented content rather than the Mongolian stuff. And so I'm not sure if there's any Chinese one that's like super worth highlighting, that's super strong. I don't think any of these have like Chinese culture in a way that's observable, which is kind of a little bit no, it's just Confucian academies, which by the way everyone gets, and this is a really nice building, so or everyone in this area gets. Can we not hover it? Yeah, you basically get extra promotions and institution growth and literacy for burgers, and Korea, Japan, all of them can build this in addition to China being able to build it. Alright, so for some of the other ratings, we have population and expands, both 8, and we have resources and geography 5 and 3.5. A lot of this is just very strange and completely obliquely different than the other countries in their entirety. And so let's try and go through it a little bit, but like trying to talk through this is actually just feels like you're going crazy. Okay, so the pop, you have 91 million pops, so you obviously have the most in the entire game, and to the extent that it's grouped, it's mainly grouped in this like kind of little semicircle where majority of your pop is. Your capital's up here. In theory, your long-term capital, I think you want in Hangzhou, but okay, the pop tends to be coastal. It's more densely occupied here, and you have an enormous amount of it. I think Hangzhou is one of the better natural harbors. You can get it to max reduction, and then you can get decent maritime protection here, and then you have a decent skip over here to get into Korea and Japan as well. So I think that Hangzhou is just like, if you're playing Korea, Japan, or China, I think this is where you want your long-term capital. But you have an enormous population density here, and then this kind of brings us to the terrain. The terrain is going to be mixed bag. You have really nice terrain up in the north. It's farmlands, flatlands, mostly, with a bit of wetlands all around. Wetlands is kind of okay in its own regard because you get to build the iron building, the rural iron building, or it's not rural, it's just an iron building. You also have a big ass lake over here with a bunch of farmland. It's kind of nice. And then you get to the south, and it's hills, forest, and a bunch of this stuff, rough terrain. Difficult to project control through, and is not the best terrain, so rating this is weird. You put your capital, I think, over here, long term. You deal with the Red Turban Rebellion first, however you're going to deal with it, whether you're staying as what you want or being someone else. And then this is just an absolutely insane power base. And on top of this, you are going to have in a bunch of these locations the Grand Canal of China, which stretches, I think, from Hangzhou all the way to Beijing. Local proximity cost minus 10%. And extra dev growth, food capacity. Local food capacity plus 100. So this is going to be a bit of a vibe. We're not going to trace it out, but this is a modifier. And so, but it's difficult to evaluate because we're talking about over 1,000 locations. So like, territory geography here is not so great, right? But because it's surrounded by mountains, but over here it's fantastic. Okay. For resources, we have a very similar sort of situation where it's very difficult to talk about because you basically have multiple regions with multiple like affinities or good or bad or this type of things. We'll just kind of talk through some of this. You have a decent amount of pepper. A lot of it is going to be located over here. You have a pretty decent spread of gold all throughout the entire region, and silver as well. We're just going to highlight the gold. You have some premiums. The density is not insane like it is in Korea, but you have like a good chunk of them. You have this weirdly weird situation with wood, where you have a ton of wood in the south and some barren spots in the north. I think that in general, I think we've already done it, but closing off the lacquerware buildings and the carpentry buildings makes sense, so you can expand out RGOs, collapse the price of wood, at least at the opener. You have a ton of mediums. You have access to every rare mineral, and here they're even all right together. And by mediums, we mean the tea, the silk, and the dyes. You're more heavy on the tea than anything else. But you have some solid stuff. You have gems. You really, I mean, the thing is, you just have everything but elephants, and if you want to have elephants, you can go get the elephants. As far as the food goes, generally your density is pretty high and pretty skewed towards having a lot of food. You can see in the south, you just have an enormous amount of rice. You kind of don't care about food though, and can urbanize just very, very aggressively. I guess a little bit less so to the north, but a big part of this is population and the presence of rivers. But when you have a really high population, generally speaking, peasants can cover their own sort of food concern with the peasant consumption production. You can see here in terms of what we are getting. Let's see, can we hover this and see what the source of food is in the province? No. I forget exactly where it is. Most of this is coming from just peasant production of food, and if we we can highlight something like silk, and we can see that it's producing plus 61 food because the subsistence agriculture here plus 730. So you're going to get an enormous amount of food production from peasants, and as you have really high pop locations, this tends to become just like overwhelmingly large, and you have really high pop locations, and so you kind of don't need to worry about food in any place that's super densely populated, which is all of down here, and can urbanize very, very aggressively in terms of your location. I suppose we could take a look at rivers. There are going to be several river veins. Hangzhou is on one, and so there's going to be a lot of rivers down in the south specifically, but also several in the north. You can get your padlock canals, your bridges, your etc., and you will be able to reduce proximity, but this is kind of what we have going on. Again, we didn't even look up here, like, mainly because this breaks away and does its own thing, and then you would have to recapture it, but there's over 1,000 locations. There's a lot going on. Overall, you have some really nice pockets. You play around those pockets, and you have resources pretty nicely distributed all throughout. Alright, we didn't talk about expands too much. I think that's because you're just pre-expanded. I don't know how to rate this. It's like, you don't need to expand if you don't want to, and if you want to, you can just roll over everyone. For explosiveness, we gave it a 1. You have to deal with the Red Turban Rebellion first. For late game, we gave it a 7. You can get the full reduction on proximity, which I think is kind of the most insano thing. To be fair, you actually have more stuff going on than Russia. In Russia, we gave a score of 8 in the late game, but it's just... China is just like an aberration that just like is categorically just completely different from all these other countries, especially with the Middle Kingdom IO just being absolutely absurd. For institutions, we gave it a 2. It's difficult to pull institutions, and this should maybe even be lower because it's going to be very difficult to get this onto 20% of your pops. We haven't done this, and so maybe this should be lower. I don't really know. For formables, I gave it a 3. You're already formed, except what's united must break apart, and what's broken apart must unite, something like this. For IO situations, we gave it a 3. Red Turban Rebellion, really good. Or sorry, really bad. Middle Kingdom, really good. This should actually probably just be higher, because the Middle Kingdom's insane. Well, the Middle Kingdom does have some mixed bags because you have to pay out money, but I think if you micromanage it well, it maybe makes sense. I know it's really easy to shoot yourself in the foot with the Middle Kingdom, though, and you also have some disasters that can pop specifically for China. Maybe let's leave it at a 3, not fully kind of knowing the mechanics as well as we ought to. For religion, we gave it a 5. Honestly, the religion's kind of cracked. Maybe this should be higher. You can also, I think, swap to Shinto relatively easily because you can swap to heretical religions really easy. And so Yuan can just swap to Shinto and then just start subjugating everyone if they want to. For dev and pop density, we showed a location that had close to 1 million pop. I mean, we can jump back in and show it again, but like, where was the 946,000? You put your capital here, yeah, and then you go to build in this location, and you say, hey, what's going on? Why do we build 51 levels of the building? And that's going to give you economies of scale. I think that the max level you have is less than half, yeah. So in theory, maybe you shouldn't even conscript out of here because the conscripts will never replenish. Once they're dead, because the max pop is like way over capped. I don't even know how you're supposed to treat this, but I suppose before anyone dies, you're maybe supposed to queue up infinite buildings. But this is just kind of like an insane thing. You will get, what is our current production efficiency bonus from 2 buildings? We're getting, so from the marginal building, it's 1% in age 1, and then it'll go down with subsequent buildings. So we will get 50% production efficiency. Yeah. So I think probably one of the stronger strategies is to, let's show the culture. I think Wu gets released most of the time with most of the Wu culture pops. I think one of the stronger strategies is to just spend all your money into Wu and then play as Wu. But I haven't tried this out. That's just my speculation. All right, coming back. We are going to have a 4 multiplayer. Manpower, 6.5. This maybe should be higher than Delhi. See, here's the thing. It's like, you can get as many pops with Delhi. Yeah, Delhi should probably just be a little bit higher, but like maybe this could be higher. The thing... I'm just imagining like a level 70 armory in the location with 950k pops, but that's not the norm. You will have decent pop density though in your like highest pop areas, and you'll have decent control everywhere. Oh, they also have a building that gives plus 10 control. We didn't even show that, but okay. Resilience, give it a 3 because I think they will be easy to mess with if other players want to dogpile you. And also, I think that most multiplayer rule sets will probably just play with a mod where there's a bunch of Chinese countries and multiple people are playing China. For crowding, I give it a 4. Yeah, I don't know how the multiplayer treatment of China will be. Generally, there's like special rules for China. Either no one's allowed to play it, no one's allowed to expand into it, or it's going to be broken up and it's going to be like, I think one of these things. Military Boast 3 and Benign 3. I think people go after it if they can, and okay, if they can't, then they can't. But yeah, let's quickly show the Insano building off as well, the plus 10 control building. To be fair, this building is going to be the source of most of your expenses, so you actually turn them off in the kind of early game here, but they're just going to get a plus 10 max control. Yeah, real good. So you will be able to get 100 control really easy in a lot of locations between the proximity reduction and this. If you just want to micro your living brains out, this will be a bit of a thing that you could do, and it will be strong. I feel like this is somewhat relevant for multiplayer, but you also start off with Vision of Europe. I assume multiplayer mods will probably make this more even, however the asymmetry is in Vision, but this does mean you can interfere with stuff in Europe more easily, and maps of stuff is going to be useful. Also, the reason we said it just like micro your brains out is because you have over 1,000 locations, and if you want to play with 14 markets from game start, you can. But it's a lot to click, a lot to do. But I think we're going to wrap it up. I think no one was surprised that, or well, like, China's just obviously like the strongest in most of these games. But let's jump back into the browser and kind of go back through it. Maybe a little bit briefly to cap things off. And let's maybe include the weakest European, which we had in Naples. I think that the top 10 European, I think that Austria was the cutoff. Actually, after we changed our list, Austria was in here. And I think, was Venice in here? But, okay, we have all the Europeans here together with the kind of normal top 10. But we started talking with Mali. Really good resources, and kind of an interesting situation where you're going to be really good at colonization. And if they ever reintroduce malaria, it will be your turn to shine in terms of the colonization. Maja Pahit, very, very isolated, can colonize Australia, can project control to Australia, kind of a unique and interesting situation. Japan, they have some issues with their situations in regard to Sengoku Jidai. I don't know exactly how to evaluate them. If we just ignore that, they have insane resources, and probably the strongest religion because they get an insane CB. Maybe not, though. China's religion is really strong. Maybe we should have rated that higher, but okay, let's just continue through our list. We have Orissa in 10th place. Orissa has some pretty good military bonuses. They have access to just the Asian bonuses in general, and they're just in... India is just like at the crossroads of getting institutions and having an enormous amount of pop, and Orissa's kind of in the middle of all that. You do have some awkwardness from your location. I think you go naval. I think it's fine. We spent less time talking about England, Spain, and Great Britain because we'd already talked about the Europeans previously. But England, strong naval, you get strong units. You can project a maritime really well. Your location is really good in terms of geography. We gave them a 7.5. I think this is the highest geography score because you get to project power to northern France and the lowlands. Very strong in single player. We also have Spain. Big takeaways: 35% tax efficiency. Woo-wee. But you also get proximity cost, and you are on a continental divide, which is quite strong. You get access to unique buildings, which is like an overseas bailiff, which in urban areas only, which I think is actually just kind of cracked and kind of game warping. But I think when you colonize, you're actually just supposed to own the stuff directly, maybe. The thing is, colonies have an enormous amount of dev growth and pop growth, and you lose out on that. Kind of hard to evaluate. But okay. They just have a ton of eco bonuses. They have, like, kind of the most bonuses going on. They actually have the highest eco score out of not China, I think, now that we nerfed the merchant republics, because I think merchant republics are a little bit weaker than we thought before, and they'd also been nerfed. In France, we have in 7th place insane pops, highest pops in Europe. They have a lot of max tax modifiers and just like a lot of just very solid stuff going on, and really strong levies in the opener for the Cav. Ottomans just have the absolute strongest content other than China, and they have kind of unambiguously, in my opinion, the strongest military content because they just like open the game with 10% discipline. Delhi, to some extent, has a really high discipline potential as well. Mamluks, terrible content, excellent geography, tons of pops. Is kind of the name of the game. Also a little bit of rough start in regards to government or estate privileges. You start off with a bunch of really bad ones. Vijayanagara, just extremely solid. The good resources, lots of pops, kind of medium on the content, absolutely insane the way that their provinces have like 15 plus locations in them, and really opens you up to weird cabinet action play in provincial level cabinet action play. There's also like, we didn't even really talk about it, but there's like cabinet actions that apply only to provinces, I think, or I think some of them got buffed, but like the one that gives you production efficiency in a province, I think it got buffed to be an area, so less to write home about. You don't have massive areas as Vijayanagara, if I recall correctly. Next up is Delhi. Really struggle with the fall of Delhi kind of opener. Kind of tried to give it as low a score on that front as possible, but honestly maybe should be a little bit lower. But if you kind of escape and get the escape velocity, you're just in an incredible spot with a ton of pops, a ton of dev, and really good resources, and you're just going to conquer India, something like this. And then in second place we have Korea. A lot of this has to do with their ability to abuse China. That we have them here, which I think that they are uniquely positioned or best positioned to abuse China. To some extent, I guess Dynam could too, but they start with Celestial Governorship. They have a bunch of procs cost modifiers. They have the most insane resources in the game and are just very explosive, and they have at the start of game barracks, and so you can you're in the best position to fight China and take stuff off of China and just take the mandate yourself eventually. And so to the extent that the mandate's insane, you can play that game pretty easy as Korea, or you're just in an excellent place too. And you just kind of, we have a bunch of 8s for Korea. We have 8 in resources, 8 in explosiveness, 8 in IO situations. I really do think Korea is just kind of insane. And I think that if there's any rating that people are going to disagree with me on, it's probably going to be Korea. They don't think it should be this high, but I think Korea is really good. We might do a video on that. I think there's a couple exploits as Korea specifically that we didn't mention in the video, but we may be doing a video. or we didn't mention here, but we may be doing a video. And then there's Yuan/China, which is our heaviest weighted things population. They have the most pops in the game. They also have, with the Middle Kingdom IO, just the most insane content in the game, and can get the full reduction to minus 100% proximity cost. And so they don't need to score well on anything else to be number one, I don't think. And in fact, they aren't scoring super well on many things other than these. We have late game that they scored well, and also pop density, which is kind of an extension of pop, but also they have really high development. I think we cruised over that a couple times when talking about other countries' development. They have like 30s in development, so well, I guess expands, we gave them an 8, maybe we didn't need to, but they're also 6.4 ahead of the next country, so they'll just be unambiguously number one, kind of no matter what we do as a result of the population. This will, after we publish this, maybe not immediately after, because I don't know if I schedule this or publish it by hand, we will make this spreadsheet available, and you will be able to play around with it. You can, for example, highlight specific regions. If you like. It is sortable. You just need to make a copy of it, and you can do a bunch of stuff with it. You can sort by who has the best multiplayer adjustment, something like this, which the Mamluks we have as the best multiplayer adjustment, then Majapahit, and then Vijayanagara, then Spain or Orissa. And you can sort by stuff like military bonus. You can also make your own scoring if you think that I got something wrong, or change the weights of various things. Like, let's say you think that military bonus is actually just really important. You could bump that up to a 7, and then sort this by, you know, this, and you would get Ottomans as number 2 nation, right? And you would get a much different ranking if you thought that military was way more important, or maybe you think that pop's not important. It's pretty easy to see how stuff would change. One that I think is probably interesting is if institutions, if you just score this at a 7 instead of a 2, and then you sort, suddenly well, it doesn't improve so much, but just in general, you will see much better scores from Europe. Still only have 3 Europeans, man. But if you swapped places, actually, let's swap and say pops are only a 2, and institutions are a 7, and then you would have, you know, Mamluks, Ottomans, England, France, Spain, kind of all in the mix here, and India still making a decent showing, because India actually can pull a bit of both, but you would see a lot more Europeans. And so if you think that I got it dramatically wrong in terms of weighting, but you still think my analysis of each individual score is somewhat reasonable, you can mess around with that. And so that is something that is going to be available, and you just have to save a copy of it. And also you can just make new categories. You could add new cells and like program it yourself, but also you can replace some of these categories if you think geography shouldn't be considered, but instead how fun it is should be considered. You could do that. That's not what we would do, but that is something you could do. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, if you've watched this all the way through just without stopping, this has been a long video. Probably get a drink of water / take a walk. Also, if you want to support the channel, a really good way to do it is if you are going to be buying Paradox products, and you are going to be buying them at full price. If you purchase them off the store and use code GENERALIST in all caps, you will not save any money, but 12% of the sale will go our way, and so this is a good way to support the channel if you're already buying full price products. If you're not, and you're like a salesperson, or you just wait for sales, don't do this, but this will be a way that you could kind of support for free, other than the inconvenience of having to enter in your own code. Notably, double check if you're not in USD, because prices and exchange rates can vary, and also other content creators will have this, so if there's someone else you wanted to support, ask them if they have a code. I think some people are going to be getting more codes. Like, I think that this is going to be something that Paradox is expanding, although right now I think it's there's kind of a lot going on, so maybe that's not in the nearest future, but ask content creators if you like them in particular, and like, don't be afraid to ask them later in several weeks or months or what have you if they've gotten one, because it might change. But other than all that, have a good one. Bye-bye now.